Oh, yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday Show. Jimmy's out today, but I am incredibly fortunate that one of my all-time favorites and yours, Paulogia, is here with us today. How you doing?
I am doing great. I'm excited to be talking to theists today, hopefully.
Hopefully. I mean, we've got a couple calls queued up. By the way, this is a live call-in show. You can see the number down below on the screen any moment now. But also, if you go down below into the channel description or the show description, you'll find it 720-619-2288. And there's also a link there to go to callinstudio.com/show, blah, 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 so that you can call in from your computer. One couple of things to note. First of all, thank you everybody for tuning in. It's Sunday. It's a brand new year here. It's amazing because we did the New Year's Eve show for hours and hours. And so here's the first show of 2024. It's going to be a wild year, I guarantee you, with there being an election in the United States. We are optimistic about growing and changes at the line. And yet, weirdly, the announcements for today are going to be significantly shorter than they normally are, which is you're on the Sunday Show today with myself and Paulogia. And the only other show that I have an actual announcement for that I must do right now is tomorrow. Shannon Q is going to be doing Skeptalk with the Magic Skeptic. And just note it, write it down. You need to be here. You tune in. Go ahead, like, subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss anything else. But yes, this show, the Sunday Show, is a live call-in show that focuses primarily on theistic callers. So if you're a theist, go ahead, call in. All we really want to know is what you believe, why you believe it, and if you think other people should believe based on that as well. And then we can discuss it. So far, we haven't really found, we found points of agreement, but we haven't been convinced of any God or anything supernatural. By the way, it doesn't have to be a God thing. If there's something else you believe that you're pretty sure that, left-leaning skeptic yahoos like us might not completely agree with, you can call it about that as well. Theist callers are always going to get priority. We've got a couple callers now that are not theist, and we want to get through the announcements. But do you have, did you, Paul, did you make New Year's resolutions at all?
I absolutely did. So many. And yes, I will leave it at that, barring a follow-up question.
Well, you can share or not. See, I didn't tend to make New Year's resolutions as a New Year's thing.
Okay.
And yet, despite that, it's like Arden and I made a list, and it's like, we want to do this, we want to do this, we didn't sit around and do it New Year's Eve. This was, for the 2 months leading up and the 7 days since New Year's Eve. It's like, okay, because I guarantee you, if you guys came down to visit right now, I'd bet money that you would feel uncomfortable in my house. Just because with so many animals and us constantly moving everything around, it's a clutter bomb. It's not filthy. I don't like filth at all.
Right.
But clutter doesn't quite bother me as much. I'm a bit kind of scattered anyway. But yeah, it's a disaster. So we're going to be moving bookshelves around, pulling them out, setting up new reptile enclosures. We're going to have an entire wall just full of a bunch of reptile enclosures. And we made
for some reason my mind is of the type that when those something about the switching of the calendar or whatever, my psyche is such that I feel like I'm giving myself a bit of a clean slate, and it lets me kind of refocus and renew. At some reason, I know not everyone's like that. Some people like it's just the next day, but I think I fall into that trap, artificial or not, and it's often it's helped me. So
Yeah,
anyway, renewal to improvement. I mean, there's no wrong day for that.
I'm really good at procrastinating and rationalizing all the aspects, like every aspect of it. There's people who would be like, "Oh, Matt's so good at multitasking because he can, take a call while he's playing a game of chess and reading chat or whatever it is." No, that's not really that's not really me being good at multitasking, but I'm really, really good at procrastinating and making excuses to make it seem like no. I see, and I can tell you, this is both honest and an excuse. Take that what you want. I'm really good under a deadline. Like in the 10 years I've been making videos, I've never, ever, ever missed a deadline, including the period of time that I had open heart surgery. I got my videos done 2 days before I went in for surgery, and I got the next month's videos done before the end of that month. I will not miss a deadline. The problem is I will wait till the last possible second. And it's incredibly frustrating. So I'm afraid if I was like, oh, let me set some New Year's resolutions, I don't think any of them would actually happen. But if I look around and say, ooh, we're going to have company at the beginning of February, let's use January to completely change the way things are organized and structured in the house and make it good for us.
Yeah, I recently found out an event I was hoping to do was delayed, and then I was like, oh no, now I'm just gonna procrastinate. I was just like you, in my head, I'm like, well, now I'm gonna procrastinate until the new time, and it made me a little bit sad just for that. So I get it. I'm with you.
It's although I do have a coffee table, and
yeah,
in support of your take on it, my coffee table is one of those ones where there's the coffee table and then there's like a shelf underneath it, which I would imagine be the worst coffee table you could imagine. Because
two surfaces. Yep.
The shelf underneath is loaded down with books and other things like that we would have in the living room. But the actual coffee table itself also has stuff on it. So on that front, you're absolutely right about how they get used. I just don't mind it as much.
That's fair. I said my take is only valid if you have the same take on clutter as I do. Otherwise, I'm probably irrational.
It's so funny. So my brother's in chat. Hey, bud, I hope you're feeling better. He had the flu the last couple of days, so we didn't get to play much. But somebody evidently made some comment about, with all these animals and everything else, the house probably smells. And Brad said, I have to say there is no smell, at least from my perspective, which is very sweet. But he's not telling the whole story. And that is my brother can't smell anything. He had an incident when he was in the Navy, and he can't really smell anything. But we try to make sure that the garage where the rats are there, we clean that thoroughly every Monday because trash goes out Tuesday, and that keeps any hope of the smell down. The snakes, the Crebos, have a distinct smell, but you can't smell it until you stick your head in the enclosure. But anyway, I just spent 9 minutes just visiting with Paul because you know what? That's what you should do. Welcome, everybody, to the line. Welcome to the Sunday show on the line. We've got callers ready. If you're ready to jump in and take them, I will start clicking them.
Let's do it.
All right. Cammie in Pennsylvania, pronouns are they, them, wants to talk about Michael Roode. So welcome, Cammie. You're on with Paul and Matt.
Thank you. I don't know where to start. Have you ever heard of Michael Roode?
I don't think I
have not.
Oh, I think if we were going to... Okay, I'm sorry. Hang on. Michael Roode is ordained minister who is now a Messianic rabbi. and he has many, what do you call them, pastors and ministers that he has underlings. But he has a show called Shabbat Night Live.
Nice.
It might be a good idea to check this guy out. I would love to see what you guys could do with it. I'm too shy. For me to be calling you, I'm like, I'm nervous. But
well, what makes you think we should spend time checking him out?
Well, they do tours of Israel, and they're endorsing Israel's conflict with, well, not just the conflict, but they're telling the Christians in this country, the ones that are pulling out of the church, and if they get them before they really decipher their Bibles and realize that there is no God, what they're doing is they're pulling these people in to the Torah. And they're actually believing that these are the end days and that Israel's going to conquer Gaza and, well, the whole Middle East. And, well, we all know what happens in the Bible. The Bible says that the entire world is going to be given to the Israelites. But this isn't good.
So
hang on.
I assume you disagree. I just don't want to make an assumption.
I disagree with Michael Roode. Yes.
You disagree with Michael Roode.
Me and
okay.
my two sons. Huh? What was that? I'm sorry. What was that?
I don't think we didn't say anything. Carry on.
Okay. See, I don't agree that they should be going and putting people in danger, going to tour Israel, and they're even going into the Gaza Strip where there's this big red sign that says that you go in at your own risk, and they're going in touring places like Bethlehem and Jericho. And
so if there's a sign that says you're going in at your own risk, then people know that they're going in at their own risk. So what's the objection?
But, they also have this area where they're encouraging people to buy houses in the forbidden spaces. And this is why they're getting bombed. Because these people, okay, this is going to be like a political thing. The Palestinians are fighting for their own homes, for their families. And I believe that this is where this gets to be dangerous, because well, yeah, it does. Michael Roode kind of encourages people to read their Bibles and to accept the fact that that land is going to be given to Israel, and they're encouraging the Christians to move to the Middle East. We heard it from him, me and my sons. We pulled out of the church, and we were misled by Michael Roode for a time before we realized that this is all nonsense. But we know how dangerous this can be because we know what they're teaching. But I'd like you guys to see it too. And I'm surprised nobody's called attention to Michael Roode before.
I'm not. He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. He has virtually no followers on Twitter. And while he has 250,000 subscribers to YouTube, I'm pretty much convinced looking at his YouTube channel that those were purchased. Because if you look at his videos over the last month or so, one of them's got 13,000, but most of them have around 1,000 views to a couple thousand views. I mean, we're going to have that many people watching live. I think you might be overestimating his reach with what's going on, and how big of a concern something is, because at the end of the day, I mean, he's doing stuff, but if he's exercising free speech and dealing with adults, I'm not sure what.
Right.
Apart from saying we disagree, why on earth would I pay
Yeah.
attention to somebody who's not got much reach?
Maybe I thought that he had more reach than he does, but he does have a lot of pastors and preachers that, how do I put it? They sell merchandise, and then they have these followers that actually play their videos, like in their own gatherings. Did you, when you looked up Shabbat Night Live, did you see, what they're all about?
So
No,
one of the
I haven't had a chance to
I'm
watch
going to
anything. I've been on
derail
the
just a
phone.
little bit. So one of the things that I have on my channel, I built it on the back of young Earth creationists because I was a young Earth
Right.
creationist, and so obviously, pardon me, young Earth
He preaches that
creationism.
too.
Yeah, and that's fine. But young Earth creationism is definitely a subset, right, of the general Christianity. And so a lot of people looked at my channel when it started. It's like you're weirdly focused on this one thing, and it made sense because I came out of that movement. It would be
Yeah.
a little bit tricky for me to like pick every sub movement of Christianity and go after that specifically. The way I have
Yeah.
evolved my channel and my work is to go more general
Yeah.
as opposed to more specific, because a lot of the epistemological problems or the logical fallacies, or even the fact that, like, does the Christian God exist, by which I'm leveraging your sympathies, that
Right.
going more general has helped to cover cases like this rather than to
Yeah.
focus on or platform someone specific. So I'd be very hypocritical if I said I don't sometimes hyper focus on someone who's affected me personally. But that doesn't
Yeah,
mean
that's true.
that like someone like Matarai should be going hunting for every person who has a quirk about Christianity. And I guess I'm kind of asking if you agree or disagree. Is it not better to talk about the general thought problems that apply to all cults or denominations, or however the different? I'm not saying those are synonymous, by the way, but
Right.
going general is one way to do it. Of course, another way is to have call shows like this where you're actually talking to an individual, where it's one-on-one. So if someone called us from Michael Roode's church, I think Matt and I would be able to have a very engaging conversation with that person about why they believe
I
what
would
they
love
believe.
to see that. I would pay to see that.
Right. But it's a little
That's
bit...
what I really like to see.
Well, then
because,
I think, if that's
you
what
would
you
tear
want,
him down.
then maybe you should encourage, if these are people in your life who are being affected by Michael Roode.
Oh, they're not anymore.
Oh, okay, but
I
that's
am
good.
a very strong atheist now, but back then I was looking
I'm a
for
strong
God,
atheist,
and
and
I
I
fell
have
into
people in
that
my
trap.
life who are... As an atheist, I still have people in my life who are affected by different, religious thoughts and processes. And anyway, I think generally, while it is interesting to come across these people, and I Ken Ham is my particular MacGuffin, and I get...
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of vindicated because the Speaker of the House is connected to him, so I kind of have that vindication these days. But that doesn't mean that focusing... I think we kind of can lose our effectiveness when you focus in on one particular hyperbolic example versus the general example. So that's just my thought on these kind of people in general.
And
well,
I
the
just
thing that
Matt
gets
agrees or
me with
disagree.
Michael Roode is this thing with Israel. There are a lot more people in this country that are pining for Israel to take over because they want to move there. We met into quite a few of them, and they'll say that you're anti-Semitic because you're not doing it their way. And this is what Michael Roode is all about. And that anti-Semitic comment is another big reason why a lot of these people are leaning towards them. And I don't know. The deeper things get, like when a family gets blown up over there, they're playing into that Christian thing, that they're blowing up Americans, and then they use that to gain more followers. And that's where I think that gets to be dangerous. But I would love it if we could, maybe I could, I went head-to-head with Michael Roode a couple of times on my own. Maybe I can try to do that again, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I may be really bad at kind of searching, but
yeah,
just perusing his YouTube channel.
Oh no! I don't do that. I've never called into his channel. When I met him, I met him in person without his entourage.
Can I finish?
Sure.
So I may be bad at this, but just perusing his YouTube channel, I find exactly one episode of Shabbat Night Live from 6 years ago that has 6.8 thousand views, and no other episodes of Shabbat Night Live. So is this guy even still producing stuff? Is it relevant? Is it,
He just had an episode last night, or Friday night.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same. I'm seeing an episode from last night.
Okay, it's not showing up when I go to his YouTube channel. When I go to his YouTube channel, I'm not seeing it show up under the live list or under the videos list. But
you won't until Friday night. He's pretty.
Well, what I'm saying is, Paul evidently, you say he had one this past weekend, and Paul's saying he sees it, and I'm saying I don't. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on as to how I can be at somebody's YouTube channel.
I don't know.
And I'm not asking you. I'm asking Paul.
Oh, is it the? Sorry, and I'm muted for my dog here. It's a Roode Awakening?
Yeah.
Is that the channel you're seeing? And then, so on that channel, I'm seeing The Letter in the Spirit, Shabbat Night Live, 1 day ago, 5.3 views. The Letter in the Spirit.
It doesn't say Shabbat Night Live on the thing. When you go to live, which is where I would see the live thing, there's only one of those there. But okay.
Looks like he's maybe updating.
My son just showed me
6 years ago. He's had a video up for 6 years that has 6,000 views, and he has one up that's been up for a day for 5.3 thousand views. But none of that matters. I mean, I don't judge who I'm going to interact with based on their views. It's just when somebody calls in and they're like, "Have you heard of this guy? He's doing this, and we really need to pay attention." There are a bunch of absolutely terrible, vile, potentially dangerous apologists who nobody would know about if it weren't for the fact that atheists watch and share their shit all the time. Like, they don't have an audience. They don't have an impact. They don't have, is he probably ripping some people off? Perhaps. That's not my area to look into. Is he leading people into potential danger? Perhaps. That's not my area either. So apart from getting them to call in, I don't know what we should do.
Okay. My son just showed me that. What? Yeah. Okay. His two main sites is Roode Awakening International and A Roode Awakening.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to take over your show here. I just wanted you to. It might be a good idea to check out what's.
I don't know what it is you think we do.
Only because as these things happen in Israel and come up in the news, we might find that people coming from the church and getting mixed up in his nonsense, that there could be a lot more of his followers. And I mean, he's pushing the Torah. And we all know what the Torah says. And that's why I said that this could be dangerous.
I don't know what it is you think we do, or what it is you would expect me to do.
Oh no, I mean just for interest. It's not that I'm trying to cause trouble or try to bring him down or whatever the case may be.
I got enough interest.
It's just
Never
a thing
mind.
of interest.
Okay.
So it's it's been quite a few years since I even looked at anything he's done, because we pulled away from him. That would have been like 2010. So it's like we haven't even kept up with this guy's stuff.
Neither
But
has
it
anybody
seems
else.
like he's
Let's just
growing.
keep
That's
it that
why I
way.
said it might be something you might want to
Why
just
does it seem like he's
tag in
growing?
on once
Is there
in a
an
while
audio
just to see.
problem? Is there an audio problem where you just can't hear me when I'm talking?
I can't hear you sometimes.
Okay. What? I don't know why you think he's growing. I don't see evidence of that.
Okay. I guess it's because when we first started following him, he was new. Very new.
Okay.
So in looking at his latest, we only watched the one on what's the war in Gaza. We only looked him up 2 weeks ago. But we do watch your show all the time because I love how, I don't know how you had patience.
So after
I hear some of those calls.
Wow, what the fuck is going on with the audio? So after 13 years of not paying any attention to him, you looked him up 2 years ago and you decided that he's growing.
Oh no, 2 weeks ago. Just to see what he had to say about what's going on in Gaza. Because, with all the bombings and things with Israel, I wanted to see if he was involved in this. That's why I looked him up. It wasn't because I was interested in what he's doing.
I didn't say anything at all about why you looked him up. It's okay. We're going to move on. Tammy, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't want to belabor that call, but when someone says we all know what the Torah says, famously, people widely disagree about what the Torah says on a great many topics. So,
yeah, I don't know, but we got other callers queued up, so let's keep on trucking. We have Landon in Tennessee, pronouncer he, him, wants to talk about Gospels. Landon, you're on with Paul and Matt. Hello, Landon. Can you hear us? Are you muted?
Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Hey, Landon.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. So I was just wondering whether we know whether the Gospels are written by the people they, I guess, kind of tentatively claim to be written by. I've been reading a book that my cousin's been getting me to read. And she's a Christian, I'm not. So I was just curious what both of you guys have to say about the question of, do we know who wrote the Gospels?
No.
Is this... Go ahead.
I answered.
No, you understand. I was going to say, is this a plug? Because I've spent literally a whole year doing a video that I recently put up. It was literally who really wrote the Gospels, researching this quite a lot, and yet the answer is still what Matt gave. So he didn't need to spend a year on it, and that is, well, we don't. The answer is we don't know who wrote the Gospels. But Landon, I'm curious. Are you wanting us to Were you hoping that we would lay out the case, or did you have
Yeah, I was hoping for a little bit of elaboration, at least, maybe.
Sure. Well, Paul, you spent a year on it. You're better summarize it than I will. I spent a lot of time on it. I just gave the short answer. So,
I mean, trying to be very brief about it, the first time we start seeing the names applied to the Gospels is around 180 AD. And there's references back to know that our Gospels have the Gospels that we know are attached to the names that we know. If you go back about 60 years earlier than that, we start seeing names and we start seeing quotes, but the names and the quotes are never put together. And in fact, when names are given, the books that are being described don't sound like the books that we know as those books. So, for example, Papias says that Matthew wrote his gospel in Hebrew. Well, the Matthew that we have was very definitely written in Greek and not translated. The author the book that he thinks was written by Mark was left out no detail, and yet Mark is the shortest gospel. These are just examples of things I'm trying to go quickly. So there's lots of reasons to wonder why up until 180 AD, when people would talk about the gospels, they would either specifically not give them names and or seemingly give them names that don't make sense. So it seems like what happened was in the second century at some point, these names became attributed to them as other gospels sprung up. So as like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Peter and all these other late gospels, and they started to needing to, and or well-meaning Christians were just having all four and they needed to differentiate them. So the historical case seems to be such that we don't have any strong evidence that the names in the Gospels were attached until very late. Does that prove anything? It doesn't prove anything, but it also is very skeptical when you say that, hey, Matthew wrote this, and yet in the book of Matthew where Jesus meets Matthew, he copies it word for word from Mark. So isn't it weird that when you met your Savior, you didn't have anything narratively to say about that day that you didn't copy from the other guy? There's clues like this that make it seem dubious. So I would encourage you to, as you said, to read some books, to look at the videos. I gave only 90 seconds worth of just various things that make us say, it sure seems like we don't know who wrote the Gospels. It sure seems like these fishermen that Jesus had, for example, it specifically says in the book of Acts that they are unschooled ordinary men. And the word for unschooled in Greek means illiterate. And yet so in your own book, you're calling these men illiterate, and yet we're supposed to suppose that they wrote books in a language they didn't speak. So these are all just clues. I don't know. And Matt can probably add a lot of things.
No,
I was just thinking, could I ask maybe just a couple more questions? Because these questions are not really for me. They're my cousin I read the book for her. She's a Christian. I'm not. So I just came on here asking some questions for her, mostly. One thing in the book that I read that she got me to read was, why do we not see any Gospels, like the texts that have different names attributed to them? Why is there no Gospel of Mark that the exact same text is attributed to anybody else besides Mark, or vice versa? The other Gospels,
the church's attributions won out. It's not hidden. None of this stuff is hidden. Like if you open up, wow, I used to have an NIV sitting right next to me here, and I don't. Oh, here we go. So this is an NIV. You're going to find people who want to, discount this version of the Bible or King James only, etc. But if you actually open the book, there's a cover page for every one of the books. And so if you go to, I'm trying to open it to the cover page for Matthew without actually skipping past it. And I have the wrong glasses on for this. But here, looking at the NIV, it says, although the first gospel is anonymous, the early church fathers were unanimous in holding that Matthew, one of the 12 apostles, was its author. However, the result of modern critical studies, in particular those that stress Matthew's alleged dependence on Mark for a substantial part of his gospel, have caused some biblical scholars to abandon Matthean authorship. Why, they ask, would Matthew, an eyewitness to the events of our Lord's life, depend so heavily on Mark's account? The best answer seems to be that he agreed with it and wanted to show that the apostolic testimony to Christ was not divided. But this is at least not hidden. I mean, it's literally the cover page in the NIV for the book of Matthew. It says, and it's basically saying, we don't know who wrote this. It is church tradition that attributes it to Matthew. But there is no evidence that it's actually written by Matthew, and there's good reason to suspect that it wasn't written by, a first-hand eyewitness or anything like that. All of that's in the book, and a quick Google search on gospel authorship will go through a lot of this as well as one of my favorite websites, earlychristianwritings.com, will go through a lot of the, best sources to talk about things like authorship and interpretation, all this other stuff. It's not like, I would imagine there are thousands of Christians sitting in church with this is one of the most popular Bibles on the planet, this particular NIV. And it's not, it is a copyrighted thing. So you can't, unlike, King James and things that are in the public domain, you can't just quote from it without potentially, violating it. You can for fair use and criticism and stuff like that. But I'd imagine that there are tons of Christians sitting there with this exact Bible who still think that the Gospel of Matthew was written by Matthew. They didn't even bother reading the cover page. They haven't even bothered looking into this. It's amazing how all of these theists are somehow armchair experts when you want to talk to them about authorship, despite the fact that almost none of them have looked into it. And at the end of the day, who wrote Matthew is really irrelevant. It's how accurate is it? Because it could be very accurate no matter who wrote it, or it could be inaccurate no matter who wrote it. But the fact that we don't know who wrote it, and that we don't have a way to tell how accurate is it on any number of things, that's the problem. And so, yeah, we can look into the authorship, but we're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with, I think, all of that. As I said, I'm an atheist, and I'm trying to help my cousin out here, and she seems very determined to show these certain things. And I read this book, and this one thing in this whole, it was about an 8-hour book that I read, stuck out to me, that if the early church fathers, and there was no other names attributed to the early gospels, if they were just randomly attributed, you would think, or I initially thought, that seemed odd, that if there's these texts out there from very, very early on, before 200 CE, there might be more than one name attributed to these texts, but we don't have any example of that. It seems unanimous. So,
Landon, what you're saying,
they all thought, yeah, okay.
What you're saying is half true. The early church fathers do quote from these books, and when they do so, they say things like from the Gospel of the Apostles, or they actually will use sort of what they were probably using as titles, but they're not Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. But they're also not other people. So okay, that's so they don't. So they don't use another name, but they do.
No, I agree with that.
Refer to the books, and so it's weird that when these earliest church fathers were, if those names were in circulation.
Can you stop breathing into the mic on your phone? Thanks.
That they would do that. The other thing is, if she's asked, or your friend, I guess I don't know if your friend is asking, what about, why aren't there manuscripts that have this? Well, you look it up. The earliest manuscript we have of Mark that has the full complete title page to it is from 300 or 400 AD, right? It's well after the time that we're even talking about. Same with the first copy of Matthew, which is manuscript P1. It looks like the very top. We have the very top of it, and there's no title at all. So again, these are half truths. The earliest ones we have only are unanimous in what titles they give, but the earliest ones we have are way after this whole period that we're talking about, when they're anonymous or not. So you need to look up these half truths, and I would say the same is probably true about my work. Double check, make sure that I'm not, misattributing and saying these half truths. But these are not great points without an easy answer if you just do a Google search. So
it's also the implied argument there is It seems strange that there would only be one name attributed to this. Why does that seem strange? There is no signed copy. We have no way of investigating and determining who it is. And the church, which controls and dictates things to believers, established a name and was, for the most part, honest about it from the get-go. If the church says this is the gospel according to Matthew, can't demonstrate that it's Matthew, and nobody else has a way to demonstrate that it's anybody else, why would it be surprising that the church's story wins out? What's the competing story and what's the evidence anybody could present? They have no way of showing anybody else wrote it. They have no signed copies, and they're going up against the church who puts itself in a position of authority. Frankly, I'd be shocked if there were people who were trying to make an argument for specific authorship from anybody else.
So the thing I found weird was, since there's other gospels that the church doesn't agree with, it just seems like there should be other copies out there that maybe not that we should have found, but there seems like there should be other copies out there of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, like the exact same text, that have different names attributed to them.
Why?
If they were just randomly.
Why?
If they were just, I'm trying to. If the people were trying to attribute those names for their own.
Hello? Hello? I think you muted yourself.
Or all got disconnected, maybe.
Testing.
Oh, yep.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
So why do you think there would be other copies that were attributed to other people?
Because it just seems like so there's other gospels that didn't make it into the Bible, and
Yes.
it just seems very, very odd that we would not, like, if those 4 gospels, those names attributed to them were just there for authority or for some other kind of reason besides actually thinking those people actually wrote those gospels. There would be other gospels that were the exact same kind of text that would have other names to them. That seemed.
Why?
That was the only thing in the book that I read.
You just keep
that
saying the same thing. Landon, stop. You just keep saying that it's surprising, and I keep saying why. Are you going to get to the why? Does it seem surprising?
Why were those names attributed?
I don't know. I don't have a time machine. What difference does it make? That asking a question of why were those names attributed in no way explains why you find it surprising that there aren't other copies of the same book with other names. But first of all, this is during a period of time where a good chunk of the people were illiterate, where books were precious and rare. There's also no signed authorship, and there were known forgeries going around to the point where Paul has to remind people, even in his books, even in one of the forgeries, somebody pretending to be Paul says, Paul, write this with my own hand. And one of the things was that once the church asserts, hey, this was actually written by Matthew, who's going to challenge that? And how is there going to be any foothold of that? So even if there were other books floating around in the 2nd century that were, other copies of this, that somebody says, oh, no, this is actually from, James or whatever. Once the church steps up and says this, it's not like we have multiple copies of this. We don't have full copies of any of the originals of any of these. We have scraps of these.
I get
why is it surprising? So why is it surprising that you don't have other copies of the Gospel of Matthew that are attributed to somebody else?
Because I think the question is, like, if the name attributed to Matthew or Mark or Luke or John is just for an authoritative reason or some other reasons, you might suspect that there would be other churches in the area that would attribute a different name to them, like, because that's
and you might
historical.
suspect that there were other things that didn't make it into the Bible, because there were.
Yes, I agree with that.
Lots of them. The Passion Narrative, Q, the Signs Gospel, the Gospel of
But
Thomas,
that's
the
going a little bit
Apocalypse of
off the point,
Adam.
right, Matt?
Sorry,
Well,
what? Are you suggesting that I'm off point on my own show while asking you repeatedly the same question on why you find something surprising?
Yeah, I'm saying that it's
cool. Thanks.
I'm sorry. Sorry. The thing I was like just calling it about on this, I've read this, it was about an ARR book, and this was the only thing that I found maybe a little bit interesting in the whole book, that if the early church fathers of the Gospels, they seem to all agree on who wrote the Gospels, and we don't have any records of anybody else saying any. Okay, yeah, okay.
I urge you to just go and investigate which church fathers you think are early and which ones you think are late, because it's easy to lump them all together. And the earliest ones don't. Sorry about my dog. The earliest ones don't attribute any name at all. It's the late ones that do, and the fact that the late ones are unanimous is kind of an argument from silence, right, Landon? Like, it's like you're arguing that no one.
Yeah.
You're arguing that no one did a thing.
Justin Martyr and a lot of the very early people, they don't name the Gospels at all when they mention these kind of things.
Right.
And I think that's the best evidence for the case that you're making.
Right. And so you're surprised that we don't have a certain piece of evidence, but we're talking about a time period where first of all, like, it was something had to be copied and copied and copied and copied for it to make it to where we are. So we have no idea what people were writing and saying in that time period, right? That's just silence. And we also know that things that were later heretical were copied less. So if people had been saying that this was actually the gospel of Bartholomew, if a handful of people were doing that, that probably wouldn't get copied to the point where we now have a copy, right? Because they were in defiance. So
yes,
occasionally you get defiance, and that's fine, but you don't expect to find every polemic against that was being discussed or issued in the day. So I think the thing that you're finding really compelling is really just an argument from silence. Do you agree?
Halfway. I think that what you just said, like, we don't actually have any examples of defiance when it comes to the Gospels, or I think the argument that I'm going to make to her is even the forgeries of the Gospels, like Judah,
right,
Mary, and all those kind of things. That just seems odd to me, though, honestly. Like, I figure we would have some people that would have taken these same texts and put a different name to them.
I disagree, and I don't care that it seems odd to you. We've been over this.
All right. I've taken up enough time, then, probably.
Cool.
Keep asking questions.
Yeah. If you think it's odd, go out and research it. See if you can find an example. See if you can make a case. See if you can do something scholarship-wise. I'm not here just to, hey, do you think it's weird that the Gospel of Matthew, that was attributed that name by church fathers a little late, wasn't attributed to somebody else early? And my other question is, how do you know it wasn't? How do you know the church didn't destroy any attempts by this? It's not like we have any copies. We have no full copies of any of this. We have no autographs. We don't have a way to investigate it. And the winners are the ones writing history. To say that it's a bit odd that you haven't found one is like saying it's a bit odd that we haven't found an entire full, first generation copy of the Gospel of Matthew. Okay, well, it can seem odd, except that they're incredibly rare.
No, I don't think that's odd. I think Paulogia described earlier why I think there's good reasons to think that the earlier manuscripts didn't have any names attributed to them at all. I think we have good reasons in thinking that.
Maybe they didn't. Maybe they did and they were hidden. Maybe they were did and they were lost. Maybe they did in some tiny pocket in some church in Ethiopia has a Gospel of Mark that's labeled, Simon. But
Yep.
the fact that we don't, have a copy of the Gospel of Matthew that's attributed to somebody else is no more surprising to me than we don't have an original copy of Matthew.
I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
Cool. We'll see you later, Landon.
All right.
Because I can't take you breathing into my ear anymore. I got a windscreen on my microphone. I can't even get it to make that noise. When
You can't even. Yeah, me too.
But I get it. People are calling on their phone and other stuff. It's just I had to mute him like 5 times just because there was the thundering. And that's a good way of describing how the thunder sound works for us. But, all right, we have more callers, and there's more queuing up. By the way, if you are a theist and want to call in and explain how you know about gospel authorship or any of that, by all means, give it a call. But we have Timmy calling in from Amsterdam, pronouns are he, him, wants to discuss new evidence against the resurrection of Jesus. So welcome, Timmy.
Hi, Matt, Paulogia.
Hey.
Hey. Matt, I would just like to start by saying that I do appreciate your debate breakdown. That's really helped me in my line of work.
Well, thanks.
All right. Well, I have a very religious family. I'm an atheist myself. And while debating with my family, which is something we often do, my brother made the point that if I could find better evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ than what we do have, would be a bit more compelling to him to believe, right? If there was a better scenario that was more believable than what we currently have, that what is stated in the Bible, he would be a bit more open to it. And so this discussion started because we found a video from Pastor Mike or someone of that sort. And so I was just simply trying to come up with at least 2 or 3 scenarios that could prove that there could have been better situations than what we do have to prove the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so my first situation or scenario that I came up with was that if prior to the the death of Jesus Christ, people were like able to die and resurrect again, granting, of course, the Christian spiritual or spiritual elements or so. That if people were able to die back then and come back to life and Jesus died and that didn't happen anymore, that would have been a more better scenario. It would make things a bit more believable because it would be documented that people died previously and were able to come back to life. And that is not the case anymore. And so I thought I would run this thought through with you guys and see if it makes any sense, or if and because I've probably not had anyone, propose this before.
I'm not completely sure if I followed that, but I thought you were presenting new evidence against the resurrection. Is your new evidence the fact? Is your new evidence the fact that you don't have evidence of anybody doing this before Jesus?
Partially, because from what my brother said was that the miracle of the resurrection of Jesus Christ validates or gives it more evidence of it being true. So he says it's a singular scenario that happened and cannot be repeated anymore. And so my suggestion was, well, if that's the case, and granting the Christian belief is true, and we can say people are able to come back from the dead, if previously to Jesus coming to life, people died and came back to life, that would have been a bit more believable than what we do have, that people dying and not being able to come back to life. I don't know if you follow.
You're both wrong. The uniqueness of it doesn't make it any more probable that it's true. And you saying, oh, it's commonplace, doesn't tell you whether or not this instance was true. Some things are going to happen for the first time. Just a few days ago, a 13-year-old beat NES Tetris by getting to a lock screen with a 75% chance of a single line Did it for the first time in the 40 years that the game's been around. So there's a first. The uniqueness of that is irrelevant to whether or not it happened. And it's just like if it happens 20 more times after that or in the next couple weeks or months or whatever else, that doesn't change whether or not any of those instances happen. When we say,
all right,
when somebody says, hey, I've got new evidence against the resurrection, well, first of all, I would expect there to be new evidence, not just it never happened.
I don't think there's new evidence, no.
But it's like, you don't need to be presenting evidence against the resurrection. You need to be pointing out that they are incapable so far of presenting evidence for the resurrection that would warrant anybody believing it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, like I said, it popped up to my mind, and I thought, well, if I can provide him evidence with reasons why the resurrection is not possible, or I can provide him with better scenarios of the resurrection of Jesus Christ being possible than what we currently have, it might be a bit more compelling. I think that was the case I was trying to make. But you're absolutely right that regardless of if it's a single scenario or if it happened many times, it's still the same, I guess.
One more time?
Well, what I was trying to say was, I think you're absolutely right that even though the scenario happened previously, or if it continues to happen, doesn't change the fact that it's not provable, right?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Okay.
I think he's just trying to affirm for you, Matt, that frequentism isn't a valid test of whether something happened in an individual case.
Exactly.
Is that Timmy? What you were trying to say?
Exactly. Yes.
Timmy, what fact were you? What piece of evidence are you trying to explain here? Were you trying to grant that they actually veridically saw a risen Jesus and try and explain that away? I'm confused. Okay, so you wanted to grant that they actually that Jesus did die and talk to them.
Yes.
Okay.
So
that's a weird thing for me. That's a weird thing to grant, I guess.
Yeah.
Isn't the simpler answer, since all we have is testimony, isn't the simpler answer that testimony is often mistaken and often people lying? There's obviously a third category of they are accurately portraying it, but there's these two giant categories of people lying and people being mistaken that applies to all testimony. And that's even granting, that's me weirdly granting that it's testimony, which is a whole thing, maybe a bridge too far anyway. But if we're granting that it's testimony, it's very simple just to say, hey, they were mistaken or they were lying. And you don't have to imagine a whole metaphysically different world where people are resurrecting.
Yes, that does make sense. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think you guys have it. You guys are obviously correct. But aren't there better scenarios that we can use to appeal to Christians that the resurrection isn't true? Let's say coming up with better scenarios for the resurrection than what we currently have. Is that a good way to, I guess, contradict the Christian perspective?
That is how I spend most of my free time. So I'm not going to say it's a bad endeavor.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it depends on which Christian and which facts you want to grant.
Correct.
All right. There are billions of people who are believers in some version of Christianity, and they believe different things, and many of them believe it for different reasons. The overwhelming majority of them almost certainly believe in the resurrection at some point, as that is the cornerstone of, Christendom. And it's going to be, because they currently believe it, you would have to be able to prove that it didn't happen to have a good chance of changing some of their minds. Basically, I know it's the case that they are unable to meet their burden of proof, but they are already convinced, and they think they have met their burden of proof. They are convinced that this event happened, and that in their mind shifts the burden of proof onto you. You would have to show that it didn't happen in order to convince most of them. The other alternative is what I've been doing, and what I think Paul and other people have been doing as well, was just to show them they are convinced for bad reasons. And so their confidence in the resurrection is unwarranted. And so for me, rather than trying to go out and prove the resurrection didn't happen, which is silly because I can't prove a resurrection didn't happen. I don't have a time machine. I don't have a way to investigate it. I can just say that I have no good reason to believe it. And then I can go through when I'm arguing, debating with people and say, okay, what's your reason for believing this? They'll say this, and I'll point out why that's not a good reason, and this, and point out that's not a good reason. Attacking the foundations to say, hey, I know you believe this. The question is, should you believe it? And probably one of the best things, which I don't know that I do it enough at all, is how many things have you really seriously believed and then found out you were wrong about? What was it that changed your mind? You've been incredibly confident about something, even something trivial, and then found out you were wrong. How is it that the belief in the resurrection isn't also a candidate for that false belief? Get to the nuts and bolts
exactly
of
my point. Because sorry.
Yeah, no, just get to the nuts and bolts of about why people are claiming to believe something, and the kind, could you be wrong? Well, yeah, I could be wrong. And the people who are saying they couldn't possibly be wrong about the resurrection, you have no business. Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I would not spend any time talking to them about the resurrection. If somebody tells me they're absolutely could not be wrong about the resurrection, instead of talking to them about the facts of the resurrection, I only want to talk to them now about how it is that they can be so confident that any of their beliefs absolutely could not be wrong, let alone that one in particular.
That's absolutely correct, because that's exactly the same feeling I have from my brother, because he is very confident, and of course the resurrection of Jesus is like his cornerstone. It's like the reciprocator of his beliefs. And so my idea was, if I could knock that down, or at least pinch out a better scenario for him, he would have more questions about it. But I think you guys have made a good point, that instead of trying to prove the resurrection being wrong, I should rather, poke holes in the details of how the resurrection can be understood within a naturalistic worldview, I guess.
And that's what did it for me. Ultimately, the resurrection, that's why I'm not a Christian anymore, is because I tried to, once I stopped believing a lot of the core things, and I tried to build it back up from scratch. And if I didn't assume the Bible was true, that was when the case became evidently incredibly weak. And so if you can press them to try instead, without without assuming that the Gospels are correct, show me how this works, and that's going to be a better demonstration, as Matt said. Just, it's the epistemology of the whole thing versus quibbling over, did Jesus have a twin that that took his place on the cross for a while or something, or aliens did it. There's all, if you want to grant that they saw somebody, that okay, you can invent things, but that's not going to convince anyone. That's just talking about what if for a bunch. So work on them proving that it happened, as opposed to the vice versa.
Yeah,
I'm
generally always going to discourage adopting a burden of proof that you either can't meet or that you don't need to meet. So while it may be the case that Jesus never existed, I'm not a mythicist, because I don't see how the burden of proof for that positive claim that Jesus was fictional can be met, given our current ability to investigate the claim. So I'm not a mythicist. I have friends who are.
Can I ask a quick?
Sure.
Sorry. can I ask a quick question about that? Because you specifically said that you don't want to take in the burden of proof, right? So what our conversation also was about if Jesus Christ actually did exist, right? And you would, I think, from an atheistic perspective, you would like to grant that Jesus did exist, and maybe try to point out the minute details of how that might not also be true. So, are you saying that is a better approach is not to grant the historicity of Jesus Christ, or are you saying we should grant that Jesus did exist?
I have no problem granting it for the sake of argument, but I also like to point out that while I don't think the mythicist position can meet its burden of proof, neither can the theist position. The people who are asserting, oh yes, it's undeniable that Jesus actually lived as a historical being. I don't think they can demonstrate that either. And I think it's worth pointing out that they can't necessarily demonstrate that. But if we're going to just err on whether or not a person existed and had exaggerations and stories about them, I'm fine with saying, okay, well, there was somebody, or maybe a collection of somebody's, or any number of things. It doesn't matter to me. It's worth pointing out that they can't meet the burden of proof, and they'll say, hey, I find the Gospels generally reliable. Well, I find it dubious that you can claim that, considering the people who are normally saying they find it generally reliable don't know what it says, hasn't investigated, doesn't have any knowledge or understanding of how to go through and analyze how reliable a 2,000-year-old document is or isn't. But what tends to happen for most of them is they say, look, here's a bunch of mundane facts. It names Nazareth and Jerusalem and, this and Quirinius and all this stuff. It actually gets it wrong. The time frame between when Quirinius could have potentially done this census that is unprecedented in history, as far as I'm aware of, and when Quirinius was governor, and there were a number of facts there that are wrong. But what they'll do is say, it got these facts kind of correct, and nobody's really going to object to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody's really going to object to the mundane facts. Nobody's going to say, well, Jerusalem doesn't exist. Although there are people who will say that Nazareth may not have existed at the time that they're talking about, but that's a secondary thing. In any case, when they list all of those things, you can say, if I tell you 10 things and you believe 8 of them, does that mean you should believe the other 2? Because it's entirely possible for me to make a list of 10 things, 8 of which are virtually undeniably true, and 2 of which are obviously false. And if you decided to believe those 2 things based on your confidence in my truth-telling and accuracy for the other 8, you would be making a mistake.
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you guys so much for your explanation. I was hoping to get one other question in. I don't know if you guys mind.
Well, you can try it real quick, and then we'll move on to some others.
All right, this shouldn't take any more time. So I have noticed my brother works within a Christian community, and from what data that he had pulled up, and some data that I could also see from Genetified Modified Skeptic. On the YouTube channel, someone that's also that works with you guys, there was polling data that shows that Christianity is on a decline, but Christians that remain Christian are very not radical, but there's another terminology for this.
Probably fundamental, I think, if I remember Drew's video correctly.
Yes. So basically, what he said was that the Christians that still believe in Christianity are becoming a bit more radicalized, a bit more. Wow, there's a term for this. I can't remember. Well, they are very steadfast in their beliefs, right? And I wanted to ask if that is the reason why we're seeing a little bit more pushback from the Christian community on recent stuff like birth control or abortions and gay or transgender stuff. Does that make any sense?
Okay. I thought I was following you, and then right at the end, I heard transgender stuff. So is there a way you can one sentence just ask the question?
Okay. The question is, in recent years, I have noticed, and also the data shows that Christians have become more steadfast in their beliefs. And so I wanted to know if that is also uh, why Christians are becoming more reactionary. The fact that there's a deduction in Christians, does that also correlate to the fact of as to why they've been a bit more open or a bit more pushbacky in a lot of instances?
I genuinely don't know, because
Mm,
so we'd like to look at the people who are reacting strongly to things and say, this is, Christianity is dying, and so this is the last flailing around of the dragon that's already been slain, and so it's going to do some damage on its way out. Um,
yeah.
I think that's true in some cases, but also I think it is, even if that's accurate, some of the lashing out is because they become convinced, both by the Bible and by preachers and by interactions, that they are the victims of persecution, and that the world is dramatically changing around them in ways that not only do they not like, but that God would disapprove of. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
it's much easier to just say, well, let me oppose this and this and this. I think that, for example, like gender stuff, I don't think any Christian I've ever known in my entire 54 years who opposes trans rights would have ever approved of them under any circumstances. I think the foundation that they're using to oppose this has been consistent for the entirety of my life. But the difference is that not until fairly recently did trans folks have a presence and a voice and an active community of both trans people and allies working to instantiate and protect rights and things like that. And so
Correct.
what we see as Christians getting louder or more reactionary is in response to a change in the world around them.
All right. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for your help. I'll be looking forward to your debate, Matt.
Oh, cool. I'm looking forward to it too. But thank you so much, Jimmy.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Right.
All right. Yeah, that's something I forget to do. So the American, I'm full disclosure, I am on the board of directors for American Atheists. I just got an email today about our next board meeting, so that reminded me to say that. The American Atheist Annual Convention is every Easter weekend, and Easter weekend this year also happens to be on my birthday. I'm pulling up the website, not for my birthday, but for American Atheists. And yes, there's an entire website just for my birthday.
Of course.
But in any case, this Easter weekend, which will be the weekend surrounding March 31st, American Atheists will be holding their annual convention, and I'm pretty sure that it's in Philly. Is that right? I'm having difficulty actually finding there we go, national conventions. Boom. Yes, Philadelphia, March 28th through 31st. Unfortunately, I won't be there, but you should absolutely all go if you're able to go, if you're financially able to go. American Atheist Convention is a great event, in my opinion. But I will be in Florida that weekend to do a debate on Good Friday about the resurrection. And I'm looking forward to this debate more than any debate I've done since before COVID. So for those who aren't aware, I've had to shift from doing public in-person debates to primarily doing online debates from around the time COVID happened. Basically, in March of 2020, at the beginning of March, I sat down with Dinesh D'Souza in New York, and then I locked myself in the house for 2 years. And so that meant that a lot of the debates were online. There are some great opportunities, and there are some great debaters who primarily do things online. And then there are also some people who are not great debaters, and that where there's not a good opportunity for debate. But I was cautiously optimistic about being able to, make some lemonade out of some of the lemons. But now I'm excited to be back where I will be in a church surrounded by Christians, engaged in a debate on a topic that is absolutely critical to their belief. And having the opportunity to engage on that front, and then post a video and everything else, if this individual can actually make a case for the resurrection, then I might leave my 55th birthday Easter weekend as a Christian.
It's amazing news.
I know where my money
Super
is
excited.
on what's likely to happen, but I'm at least open to the possibility. All right. As a reminder, I'm going to get some quick announcements out of the way. Tomorrow is Skeptalk. See, this network is primarily about calls and call-in stuff. I do a show here on Wednesdays called The Hang Up, and that's at 6 p.m. Central. Eddie R., yes, I do plan to go back to Dragon Con. We just couldn't do it this year. And we obviously couldn't do it during COVID, so it's been a while. The show that I do on Wednesday nights can be about anything. It's still going to end up having theistic callers getting priority. But there are a number of different shows on the network at different times. If you like and subscribe down below, you're going to not just get me on the Sunday show or me on the Hang Up, but you're also going to get, for example, tomorrow on Skeptalk, it's going to be Shannon Q, who I can't say enough good things about. But don't tell her I said any of that. I don't tell her I said anything good at all. I need her to stay sharp and not think that, we actually like her. But she's awesome, and she's going to be here with the Magic Skeptic tomorrow. So yeah, tune in for that. Get your questions ready. Get ready to jump in and have fun.
You missed your chance to use the name Magic Skeptic.
Yes. I think I'll live. I can't wait. Because I don't know the Magic Skeptic, but I know skeptical magicians, and I know magicians who are skeptics. And it's funny because I'll hang out with a bunch of them at magic conventions, and then I'll turn around and hang out with them also at skeptic conventions as well. And it was so funny because I was at one of the Imagine No Religion conventions, and somebody who's probably not crazy famous outside of magic circles, but who was genuinely someone who I look up to and admire, and who I learned a great deal from, and who I'd, known about for many, many years. And I was sitting here, I'm not going to give out his name because I don't want to necessarily out anybody, but I was sitting there doing magic tricks at a table, and he walks over, and he's standing right next to me, kind of just hovering just a little off to the side and looking in. And he's got his name badge down there. And nobody there, because it's an atheist, secular, skeptic event. Nobody there really knows who he is, which is weird, because if we're at a magic convention, nobody's going to know who the fuck I am, and they're all going to know him. And so he's kind of standing there. And I finished, and he goes, hi. And he introduces himself and says his name, and I looked up, and I did a double take, and I was like, well, yes, that's exactly who you are, and my portion of the magic for the weekend is over.
It's done.
Yep,
that's fun.
It's like there's somebody here who knows everything I know and a whole bunch more that I don't. But yeah, it was great. All right, we got callers waiting. Let's get in here with Adam from California. Is an atheist, pronouns are he, him. Goes to church with a friend and wants to know how to start a conversation with them about changing their beliefs in a respectful way. So, Adam, what's going on?
Hey, Matt. Honored to be in the show. I've been watching you guys for years. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, the college screener did a good job. My friend I've known since elementary school is devout Christian. His family's like, his dad's like the youth minister, like music director and everything. And he had like, I mean, at first I never even thought about like trying to talk to him about his religious beliefs because he's been pretty hard setting it. But last year, maybe the year before, he had some tough times and started kind of doubting it. But I guess he's like stronger in his beliefs now. But I mean, if he doubted it in the past, I was maybe wanting to bring up conversations with him again because he's a pretty logical guy, and I thought maybe I could talk to him about it and kind of see if he cares more about if his beliefs are true, or if he just cares more or just wants to be Christian because it's how he grew up. I'm not sure, and I just wanted to know your opinion on how to bring that up.
What would you do, Paul?
Well, I would probably start with some of the things you already said. There's there's certain ways to sort of street epistemologize this whole thing, and where one of the great questions is, do you care if this is true? Because that's actually a really great starting question, because some people literally don't. I've had Christians tell me it's not super important because it's the club I belong to, and we're all in this club, and I like the benefits of the club, and I like the people in it. So whether it's true is secondary for me or not. So if that's the case where your friend is, which is what you alluded to, well, then probably having all those other conversations are just going to annoy you both. If he does care if it's true, then you can actually probably have him walk you through the process by which he determined that it was true. Because if you're just throwing stuff at the wall, you may not be getting to the heart of his issue. So have him build you that positive case. And if you see problems with that positive case, that's a good time to gently point out, oh, well, is that a good way of knowing whether that is true or not? For example, depending on what they say. So having your friend sort of lay out the case is going to be more effective than sort of saying, hey, let's have a debate whether God's true or not, or I think that Christianity is stupid. It doesn't. If you called in to ask advice, I'm not guessing that's where you're going. But anyway, that's where I would start. Matt, where would you start?
Yeah, I think if the person's reasonable, logical, generally speaking, and you're in a position where you guys realize that you value each other and you value the friendship as well, then it seems to me that just saying, look, I'm not trying to make things difficult or give you a hard time. I see you making decisions and believing things that I don't understand. And if you're open to talk about them, then I'm open to talk about them. And if you're not, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've kind of talked a little bit on it. Like I said, I've been watching the show for years, and I used a few of your guys' examples where I asked him a little bit like, hey, like, do you think I'm going to hell? Like, and kudos to him. He agreed. Like, yeah, I made the comparison. Like, what was it with Dahmer, where he asked forgiveness and all that if he was going to heaven or hell, and if I was going to heaven or hell. And he said, yeah, well, if he honestly asked forgiveness, he's going to heaven, and you don't believe, so you're going to hell. Wow, that's you see the problem with that. It's like, yeah, it's unfortunate, but that is like, God, like I don't know. Yeah, it's just a hard topic.
Yeah, for things like that, it's quite often the case where they're going to be like, look, it seems wrong to me. I don't understand it, but I'm a fallen creature, and God knows and understands these things better than I do, and so I have to just trust that God's doing the right thing by saving a mass murderer who sincerely repents, on a deathbed confession and conversion, while sending someone else who's lived a generally good life and never done that harm, sending them to hell. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'm going to trust that God does it. And when I hear that, I'm like, why? If it doesn't make sense to you, and it seems like it's immoral to you, if it seems like this is the worst option or a worse option, what reason do you have to trust that there is a God and that God is getting this correctly? Wouldn't it be better to say the only information that I have about a God comes from men who are fallible and biased, and God hasn't shown up to correct any of this? And so if God's unwilling to correct this, then there's only a couple options. Number one, those men got it right, and God is not going to bother to correct something that's right. Or those men got it wrong, and then we must say, why is God not correcting this? Is it because he's got something better to do? Is it because he expects you to figure it out on your own? Is it because he doesn't exist? Go through the various reasons. And if you don't have a good reason for picking one of those, how can you possibly be sitting here looking at someone who just says, hey, I don't see a good reason to believe. And in addition to not having a good reason to believe the basics that there is a God who's doing this, also what you're telling me God does seems incredibly immoral and problematic to me. Those two things combined certainly give me pause. And I don't understand why they don't give you pause. What piece of information, what fact or bit of evidence do you have that I don't? And because that should be, if you and I agree that this would be immoral under any other circumstance, what piece of evidence do you have that I'm missing? Make them make the case. Because if they're sitting there struggling with the same things you are, I'm an atheist in part because I had to sit here and try and figure out how to make the case, because I knew I was going to be asked these questions by my roommate or by anybody else who I was out, preaching or proselytizing to. How do you justify? I'm not a big fan of the problem of evil, but I know many people are, and I know it's very compelling to many people. And I know they're going to address it. And so make them defend it. And if at the end of the day, all they can say is, I can't really defend it, it's just how I feel, then to me, the follow-up question at that point is, how would you feel if I told you I believed in a different God who was going to torture you forever without believing, and that I had no evidence, no reason, and that's just the way I feel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I brought up Sam Harris's thing about how, statistically, we should both expect to go to hell. And I mean, I've brought up slavery in the Bible, how what's the reason God has for allowing that? And it gets to, oh, well, that's Old Testament, that doesn't count. It's like, where does it say in the New Testament that Old Testament just doesn't count anymore? Like, come on, dude. But I can't really push that with them because I don't really want to be offensive. I don't know if the call screener said it. Whenever I have a day off on Sundays, I usually go to church with them just out of respect for their family, just because they helped me through some hard times, and they're all great people. Actually, so it kind of makes me want to talk to them like, hey, I go to church with you, do your thing, the music's fine, cool, whatever. We get lunch after, maybe do you want to call into the line or Atheist Experience or something one of these days, just to talk to people, because I don't want to push that. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to strain the friendship or anything, but if you can talk to other reasonable people and get them to kind of sincerely question his beliefs, I think would be a healthy thing for anyone to do.
In that case, Adam, you got to make up your mind.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, you keep going to church with him, so you keep doing the thing that he wants to do to advocate for this, and you're probably sitting there giving him hope that one of these days at church you're going to have that come to Jesus moment.
No, I've 100% told him there's 0% chance I'll ever come. I literally just go with him. He's the drummer at the church. I go to support him. We hang out and get lunch after. I've made it very clear to him that I'm not. Although he told my girlfriend about this dream he had where I guess he took a bullet for me, and it was he's like, I don't know why I did it. I think just because I want to give him more time to maybe convert. And it's like, bro, there's no chance. Like, I don't know. It's
You
such a
can tell
weird
him-
position to be in.
You can tell him all you want that there's no chance. First of all, I wouldn't be saying there's no chance. I'm open to being converted just as soon as there's evidence. But you can tell him all you want, and I can tell you that if he's a sincere believer, then he has to believe there's a likelihood that you will be saved, because he has to believe that God is there, wants you to know he's there, and if you will just, blah 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 blah. This is, you are either chosen or you're not. You're either going to get saved or you're not. It is, but if you think that your friend doesn't hold out hope that you're going to get saved and spend eternity in heaven with him, I don't know what to tell you. That sounds almost as delusional as what he actually believes.
Yeah. This is like the guy who had a crush on a girl in high school and their friends.
My mom was convinced. My mom was convinced that God was going to give me and Beth a miracle baby that was going to bring us back to Jesus. And now that Beth and I have been divorced for a few years, we're still friends. I can say with 100%, well, 99.99999% confidence, Beth will never be pregnant by me. And I'm unable to have kids. And so the notion that and yet still, there's nothing that's going to stop my mom from believing that, someday God's going to bring me back to the fold. And there's other people who believe that, and maybe it'll happen, but I don't know. It seems to me like if you're looking for a way to challenge him without challenging him, you're looking for a way to potentially get him to consider stuff without having to worry about potential negative consequences. Sorry, that's not the way it works. You may be able to get him to rethink stuff, and he may change his mind, but it's not up to you to change everybody's mind. But you may be able to get him to do that, but there may still be consequences, and any attempt you make could come with really bad consequences. I don't see how you can have it both ways.
Yeah, I guess I just want him, because I've had these conversations with him a little bit, but then it always comes back to like some kind of wall like that where it's like, no, it's Old Testament, right? And it's like I push against it, but it's like I can only push so hard without like coming off as like rude or whatever. Like,
well,
what's the word?
Yeah.
It
seems to me one of the things is it's not your job to change everybody if you're not willing to take the steps that are going to be required to potentially change somebody's mind. You should go watch Frozen and learn to let it go.
Yeah, I suppose so. And yeah, I totally feel exactly what you're saying. It's like my mom is exactly that way. She's like, oh, you'll come to Jesus. And it's like, look, I might have believed this when I was like, I stopped believing when I was like in elementary school, when I actually learned what God even is. So, I mean, I sincerely doubt it. Like I said, it rounds down to zero. But yeah, I mean, I every once in a while I try to bring it up when he seems more open to it, and I might have him call the show or something and see if someone else can kind of talk to him about it. Because I don't know if I said it already. He was questioning his beliefs and kind of on the fence for a while, and I was like, okay, like maybe, but it wasn't the logic side of it. It was like the emotion side of it. I'm like, oh, how could God let this happen, kind of thing. So I don't know.
Just be there, be the guy's friend. He knows you don't believe. It's not. Yeah, it's not your job to change everybody's mind. Let him know you're open to conversations. Let him know that you want to be respectful about it. Let him know that, if he has questions that you'll try to answer, or you can direct him to some other people who potentially do. But then, you're there for him, not for Jesus. And yeah, I mean, I have a friend who's going through something incredibly difficult right now. And I only know about it because of a mutual friend, because the person who's going through something, we haven't spoken. recently, and it's not that we haven't had any falling out. It's just I got lots of friends. I don't think I was going to say I don't think I've spoken to Paul since the last time we done a show together, but that's not true because Paul just took me up the other day. But it might be weeks or months that Paul and I go without talking to each other, and yet I always know I can reach out and Paul will get to me when there's time, and Paul knows the same thing at me with respect to me. Making sure that your friend knows that. When I look at my friend who's going through something difficult, I only know about it because we have a mutual friend right now. And I've been sitting here for about 3 days debating, do I reach out to this person? Because on the one hand, I'd like to let them know and remind them, hey, I love you. You're a friend of mine. If you need to talk, I'm here. You don't have to talk to me. I'm not trying to pry. On the other hand, the mere fact that I know things through a secondary source that they may not have wanted. I mean, I'm sure that they figure out people talk, but they may not have wanted certain things getting out. And all it would do is add more pressure to them to be like, oh, great. Now I'm going to have to talk to Matt too, or I'm going to have to talk to this person too. And so there's a fine line of me trying to decide, how do I let somebody I love and care about know I love and care about you and I'd be happy to talk to you about this without saying, ooh, I know you're going through something you haven't told me yet. And right now I'm erring on the side of we've had a long relationship. If they wanted my input, they should already know that all they got to do is ask for it. Pretty much anybody who's a friend of mine knows that if they really want to know what I think, all they got to do is ask me and I'm going to fucking tell them. And so because of that, I'd rather be the person who they can reach out to without getting anxiety about what they're currently going through. Let me be the,
Normalcy.
The less complicated person in their life. Oop. Did we lose you?
Yep. No, I'm sorry. I'm just making sure you're finished. I get that. And like I said, like we're really close friends, so it's like it's always just been like a thing where if one of us is thinking it or feeling we're just hanging around talking, it comes up every once in a while. But I've gotten kind of as far as I want to go with it, and we're both cool. Like he knows I'm atheist, he's cool with it. Like whatever. Like I know obviously he's Christian, and I'm cool with it. It's fine. It just, I guess honestly, it does kind of deep down annoy me a little bit with like the little things like down the street, like church music we play, and he'll like step outside to listen to it. It's like, I don't know, just like little things. It's like, yeah, no, it's fine. Like, I'm not gonna be overly aggressive and like, how dare you believe? But it's just weird to me. Like when like his brother or someone would talk to me, like at one point I kind of debated his brother a little bit about it, and he's like, well, atheists use faith too. Like, how do you, when you sit in a chair, like you have faith, it'll support you. And it's like, no, when I was a baby, I saw people sitting in a chair, and I sat in a million chairs that looked like that in my life. So I have evidence from experience and witnessing that it'll support me. And sometimes I'm wrong.
Not only that, but every time I sit down in a chair, I do so knowing that the chair could give way. Just my confidence in the chair is proportional to the evidence that the chair is likely constructed in such a way as to support my girth. Or my mass, not girth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I've had those conversations with him, and it's like it's so disrespectful. It's like to me, where it's like, what do you mean, like no, and it just feels like sometimes I'm like the third wheel of like, oh, he's an idiot, he doesn't believe in this. Like atheists all have faith, and atheists do this. Like, are you what? And I guess he held to the position like atheists have. Like are all hardy atheists where they know that God exists. It's like, no, I'm not taking that position. I can't prove to you that God exists, and you can't prove to me he does, or vice versa. I can't prove he doesn't exist, and you can't prove he does. So I'm withholding my belief, and until you can prove he exists, I don't believe. So I'm just wondering how that's the illogical position to be in. Like treating me like I'm illogical. No. But I don't know. It gets
you don't need
things like
to stay in a relationship that is abusive. though. I mean, I'm not saying this
It's
is
his
like
brother.
abusive.
I've had more issues with his
No,
brother. With his little brother.
then set boundaries. Then it's like when the brother comes over, obviously if you're in shared spaces or whatever, but if it's better to set boundaries on this stuff than to take on the whatever angst it is that you're going about, that you're going to have these conversations. So either you're allowed to openly, gloves off, have these conversations if the brother is coming gloves off, or you don't have the conversations. Like, that sounds to me like you need to decide, back to a little while ago, decide which it is you want. And even if it's not with your friend, even if it's with your friend's brother, it's like, okay, if it's gloves off, it's gloves off, or we're leaving it alone. Because this constant jabbing at you,
having
that's not good.
I love having debates. Like, I'm great at debating, and I point out, I just use logic, and it's like, how do you beat me? And I use perfectly sound logic. So I'm perfectly fine with it. And so I'm perfectly fine when he has these discussions with me, but it's just annoying when he doesn't, or he'll make comments like that, and then I go, all right, let's put the gloves on, let's debate. Like, here's why I don't have faith. And he goes, well, I'm sure there's other things. And it's like, no, if you're going to bring these up, you can bring these up. We can talk about it. Like, otherwise, don't bring it up.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, anyway, no, I mean, I love you guys' show. I'm just super happy to call in. I watch you guys all the time. I'm subscribed on YouTube for both Paulogia and everything.
Cool.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Take care. Best of luck. And if you come up with a way where you find a more effective way to engage with your friend on this, let us know, because we're not going to have all the answers. I can only tell you what has and hasn't worked for me in different scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figured you guys were the ones to talk to with the experience. Maybe I'll even have him call in, hopefully, if he ever agrees to that.
That'd be awesome.
I'd be happy to talk to him. Take care.
Awesome.
It'd be nice to get him to call in, because we need more theist callers today. Today we're atheist heavy on the calls, and that seems going to continue to be the case. I don't know what's going on with all the Shannon shot fired. Refried beans are just gross paste that ruins food with its presence. See, and Arden loves refritos, or frijoles. I don't tend to eat them, but I don't hate them. So I feel like I'm the middle ground between Arden and Shannon when it comes to frijoles. But all right. Where are you, Paul? Are you okay with refried beans? Or do you find them to be...
Yes, I am okay. When I moved to Southern California and spent a lot of time there, it was an acquired taste, I will say. I didn't immediately love them, but yeah, I won't prepare them for myself, but I will also happily eat them if served. That's where so I feel like you're probably in the same place.
Yeah, if somebody said, hey, you need to eat these, I'd be like, okay. But when I'm at Mexican restaurants, and by the way, we're in Austin, so we have some of the best Mexican restaurants on the planet. I prefer like a dish of charro beans rather than the refried bean.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. Yeah,
good stuff. All right, we got phone calls. By the way, if you're a theist, or if you have some supernatural belief and you are spending your time engaging in chat instead of actually calling in, you've made a terrible mistake. You've misunderstood the nature and purpose of this show and the nature and purpose of the chat. The chat is not the place for you to come in and try to debate or present or talk about how much Jesus loves you or Jesus loves me. If you think that Jesus loves me or Paul, and that we are somehow, I don't know, putting up some unreasonable barrier, I'd like to know what the unreasonable barrier is and how you know that Jesus loves me.
You're suppressing the truth, Matt.
It's for some of them, it's Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And I'm like, that's not good enough. There you go. Perfect stuff. Here we go with Manos calling from Greece. Pronouns are him. wants to present an argument against a specific type of God. Ooh, what type of God are we talking about, Manos?
So the specific type of God will be defined in the argument. It's a syllogism. So it's a divine hiddenness type of argument. Should I present it?
Go for it.
So premise one: if an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God that wants to have a personal relationship with every person exists, then they could and would prove their existence in a way that convinces everyone and let them choose if they want to have a personal relationship with them. Premise two: a lot of people are not convinced this being exists. Conclusion: therefore, an all-powerful, knowing, all-loving God that wants to have a personal relationship with every person does not exist.
Okay, classic Schellenberg-ish.
Yeah, that's
So,
the argument
Manos-
for non-resistant non-belief.
Sorry.
So, Manos, are you presenting this as a good argument or as a bad argument? What's your?
I want to hear your objections or what you think, or if it could be worded better.
Oh, okay. So what you're describing is a version of, as Paul was saying, Schellenberg's divine hiddenness argument. Specifically, you didn't really include the non-resistant thing, but the fact that, if there was a God that desired a relationship with people, they would have this relationship. The fact that they don't suggests that this God doesn't exist. I think that there are problems with the argument, both in general and with the way you've structured it. But I think the divine hiddenness argument in general, on that category of arguments, are the strongest arguments against gods. I don't think we need arguments against gods because the arguments for a God haven't met their burden of proof. But the fact that we can also make good arguments against God, I think, is pretty strong. And so I would recommend you look up and read, like, even starting at Wikipedia articles on the argument from non-belief, so that you can see what other philosophers who've written on the subject in detail, how and why they worded theirs different from yours. Yours could end up having something that theirs missed or lacked, and vice versa. So I just recommend digging in on divine hiddenness in general.
Sure. Could you point the more problematic, I guess, part of the argument?
Your
Well,
first
one
premise
problematic. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Please, Matt.
I was going to say your first premise is long, unwieldy, and contains a number of different things, and also presumes that or the arguer knows what a God of this nature would do. It's entirely within the realm of possibility that there could be a being who desires a relationship, but desires it based on a volunteerism sort of thing, and realizes that any steps it takes towards that relationship would be overbearing, in the same way that we don't we look down on people, like, if you adopt somebody, so now you're not blood related, and then at 18, when they're legal, you marry them, we tend to look down on that as a really problematic scenario where someone could have been groomed or unwarrantedly coerced into that sort of relationship nature. And it could be the case that there is a God that knows better than we do, and therefore does not want to be excessively coercive. And so you would need to include something in the argument to show why that's not the case. That's just one of many potential objections that I could think of.
So, yeah, but okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, another problem with it is that even if it carries, so let's say you come up with this definition of God that works great, and you've sufficiently decided that you've given what they're desires might be, and you've nailed all that stuff down, it typically ends up coming to this non-resistance factor. And the non-resistance factor can be entirely compelling to an individual. So for myself, divine hiddenness is very much a linchpin for where I'm at, because I can know for myself what the contents of my thoughts are. In fact, the contents of my thoughts are the only thing I can know for sure. So if I'm being rigorous with myself, I can check whether I'm being non-resistant, at least at a conscious level. Now, that being the case, I cannot demonstrate to anyone else in the whole world that I'm genuinely non-resistant versus just saying I'm non-resistant. So it becomes this very compelling argument for me personally, and I can nail it down and say, absolutely, divine hiddenness totally works for Paul. But I can't use that to go out and demonstrate to anyone else that God doesn't exist, because they have no reason to think that I'm not resisting.
But isn't that an absurd? Isn't it an absurd claim to say that no one is actually an atheist? Like, I think this is a very bizarre objection to premise 2, actually.
Well, it is as far as I can tell, the claim that no one is actually an atheist is a claim that not only would they be unable to demonstrate, but that I already know is false. This ties into what Paul was saying, essentially, that I know that I am convinced that I am rightly considered to be a non-resistant non-believer. I genuinely do not believe, and I am genuinely not resistant to that. I don't know how to convince somebody else of that. And so for this reason, when somebody tells me that they believe in a God because of their personal direct experience with the divine, well, I can't prove that they haven't had personal direct experience with the divine. All I can point out is why I'm not willing to accept that that's the case, why I'm not willing to accept their conclusion. But I'm generally willing to accept that someone is honestly reporting their own state to the best of their ability most of the time. So I don't, as somebody who's a non-resistant non-believer, I don't have any problem with the notion that there are millions, if not billions, of non-believers out there. But until there's a way to actually read minds and show that and confirm the accuracy of that, you're kind of stuck.
But to your point, I've had named apologists who have large ministries tell me to my face that I am mistaken and that I am resistant. They will die on that hill, that there are no non-resistant non-believers,
or that you're a believer, and you're not,
or even that I'm a secretly believer. That's right, yeah, and just suppressing the truth, as I quipped earlier. So there are that category of people that absolutely will insist that there are no real atheists.
But can we actually say we have a very good reason to believe that people don't believe in a God in general? Even if we take the statistics, for as you said, about 1 billion plus people claim they don't believe, isn't it a kind of Occam's razor to say that it's more probable that they're all lying? It's not more probable that they're all lying, and they're probably most of them are telling the truth.
The problem is that depending on which model. So, for example, when I was a Southern Baptist, everybody knows in their heart that God exists, but God has given them over to a reprobate mind, and so they will deny it, and they've been deceived by Satan. And so when somebody tells you that they're a non-believer, that is a reason for pity, because it's clear that they have been so deceived by Satan that now they're not even aware of the state of their own mind, because God can't be wrong. And if God says that he's revealed himself to everybody, that, it is the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. And that for the fucking Romans,
Romans 1:20,
right? Yeah. For the hidden things are made evident, and they are without excuse, etc. If you believe that, and are convinced that you are being given this information by an infallible being, then necessarily the people you're talking to are wrong about the state of their mind.
And that's the thing about divine hiddenness, is the goal of divine hiddenness is actually to prove there is no God. So it's a super aggressive goal. And so the only kind of person who even cares is someone who does believe. And so that's why these little nuances matter there. And that's just pointing out the kind of resistance you're going to get from anyone who's even going to care about your divine hiddenness argument, right?
Yeah, can't I just point out though how weird the claim is that, oh, you know better what I think.
They're not claiming that they know better. I mean, you can point that out, but they're not claiming they know better. They're claiming God knows better.
They think God knows better. Yeah. Okay. I guess, but in the end, I'll ask you this: do you think a better or the best version of this type of an argument convinces you that this type of God that wants to have a relationship with every person does not exist? Are you convinced that they don't exist, this type of God?
I will say divine hiddenness is why I'm willing to say that I am more of a hard atheist. Divine hiddenness, I'm convinced that there isn't a God of the category of the type that doesn't want to have a relationship with me. There may be gods that don't care about me, and that's cool. But this argument is good enough for me personally that it puts me in that category. So it's a great argument. It's just not very transferable.
What about you, Matt?
I don't have anything to add to that.
So you're convinced that a God that wants to have a personal relationship with you does not exist? Probably.
I not only see no reason to think that there's a God that exists, I am actively convinced that there is not a God that wants any sort of relationship with me, because I'm not resistant to it at all.
Okay, so you both agree that it's a good argument, but the way I present the way I made it is not very sufficient, I guess.
Well, I think I'm not. So we're sitting here on a live TV, and you read it off, and the first premise was too long for me to actually type it all in, but I got the gist of it. And as soon as we realized what it was, I think all I'm saying is there already exists an entire category and classification and group of arguments from divine hiddenness, argument from non-belief, argument from non-resistant non-belief. A lot of these come from Schellenberg. They've been around for quite a while with a lot of discussion about it. Your version could be better. Your version could be the best. But if I had to place bets, I would bet your version is probably not the best, because the other versions we have are the result of theists and atheists battling over this particular version of God. They're a little bit more robust. They don't try to collapse three different terms or three different premises into one, essentially. And so I'm just recommending you go look into what's out there. And if you find problems with what's out there that yours solves, cool. Present it to more philosophers.
I see. Okay, I'll check that out. Very, very fast question here about this topic. So is this a reason more sophisticated theologians think that God doesn't actually want actively a personal relationship, and it's more about our parts connecting with that, supreme reality and all that stuff? Do you think that's a reason? That's my final question.
I'm not sure I understood it.
Follow it. Yeah. Can you ask one more time?
So in more sophisticated theology, people are claiming that God, they don't claim that God actually wants, tries to have a relationship with you, and it's just God is just out there, and if you want, you go and connect in some, superficial ultimate reality, transcendence type of level. You go there and connect with that. That thing doesn't care about you actually. That much.
I understood most of that, but I didn't catch the ending. So for the people who are saying that God doesn't want a relationship with me, okay, then why should I care?
Yeah, sure. They would claim that you should care because that's good for you, but God doesn't actually care if you do it or not. He doesn't try to have that connection with you. It's all about if you want to connect to that supreme reality and supreme divineness, I guess.
Okay, then they need to prove their case, or I have no reason
Sure.
to care at all what they say.
Yeah. My question was if theology have turned into this type of narrative.
Well, there are Calvinists and certain sects of Calvinists. This whole argument is actually quite impervious to. For example, when they just say that God has chosen who He's going to choose, and there's nothing you can do about that. So, if you're asking if certain theologies have evolved to deal with this, I mean that seems like one. Was that the question?
Yeah, pretty much. How this argument has changed theology? I guess that's my question. If you know about it, that's it.
Calvinism. There's different flavors of Calvinism, but you can look that up.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think the hiddenness arguments, if I'm being as fair as possible to people I might potentially debate, I gave one of the strongest objections to divine hiddenness and non-resistant non-belief. I think there's more in that. What I've frequently heard is that God has an understanding of what would be the best of all possible worlds, and we don't. And so while we can sit here and say, well, if God really wanted a relationship with me, he'd do A, B, C, or D. And that is because we are reaching the conclusion based on our limited understanding, whereas God has an unlimited understanding and a completely accurate understanding. And so whatever it is that we might have missed that would excuse and dismiss the divine hiddenness argument, that's what God says. And my objection to that is, okay, so, but now you're saying God's got his reasons and we can't understand them. And so let me push back one step further, which is why didn't God create us so that we were capable of understanding his reasons? Because you don't have to know and understand everything. Like, I don't need to know quantum mechanics to know that the physicists who understand quantum mechanics definitely understand, to whatever extent they do, what they're talking about. And I don't have to understand it for them to be capable of finding a way to explain it where I can grasp an aspect of it. And so if the simple aspect is, why are you hiding? That's a great one, because now when I push back and say, no, God could have created me in such a way where I could understand why he's hiding, then they get to say, well, he did. And he's not going to, he knows that you actually do understand that he can't come and tell you that without violating his hiddenness. But his hiddenness is essential, which he understands. And he knows that you have sufficient evidence, perhaps not to understand his reasons why, but to understand that he does have reasons because he's superior to you, because God's already written it all on your heart anyway. It's this little tight little circle where they get back around. And it's like, wow. Yeah, once you believe in magic, anything is possible.
Yeah, this type of best of all worlds is just bizarre to me, especially if you believe in a hell. So the perfect God plan is
right.
You actually get in hell. That's bizarre. Actually, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. And the world in general, when you look at it, this cannot be the best world God could come up with. Like, come on. Anyway.
Yep. We agree.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. We have a theist caller that's called in just like within the last minute. And so, hooray. And the atheist callers, hang on a little bit. But Ron in Canada is a theist who has rational arguments for belief in the divinity of the Bible. Not when you say,
Sure.
Ron, when you say divinity of the Bible, you mean like the actual text, or do you mean that we have good reason to believe in divinity because of the Bible, or that the Bible is divine?
Good question. I would say the belief in the divinity, that there is a God, and that the Bible is a divine text, and
Cool.
that the Bible is an expression of that divinity.
Cool. Make the case. Paul and I are eagerly awaiting.
Good. Thank you. Well, I would say that there may be hundreds of examples in the Bible, and I'm speaking specifically about the Hebrew Bible. The New Testament is.
Hello? Oh man, did we lose Ron?
We lost you, Ron.
Are you? Am I back?
There you go. So you're back, Ron. But
Yep.
what where you cut off was you said specifically the Hebrew Bible, and then hang on, you said the New Testament, and that's where you cut off. So start there.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Hebrew Bible, specifically, I'm defending the divinity of the Hebrew Bible, and that the Hebrew Bible is an expression of the divine presence of God Himself. Because of the nature of the book, I would say that is an expression of the divinity.
Okay, so I promise I'm not intentionally trying to be an asshole, but I find this a little funny, so I'm going to be a little bit of an asshole. It sounds to me like what you said is you can tell because of the way it is.
The way it is written, and the content that it writes, that emanates from the book, especially when God speaks, not when humans speak, but when God speaks. To me, it is a clear expression of the divinity.
How do you tell the difference? Go ahead, Paul.
Well, is it? So you're telling? I thought you were going to be giving some examples here. So you're just saying your intuition, is that it's
specifically.
divine.
Sorry. Yeah, well, specifically, many specific examples within the book that, for me, are an expression that it is divinely inspired. And what I mean is this, for example. So anytime that there is an expression in the book that represents the non-natural nature of God, or anytime that it represents the natural state of man, is an expression of man. And every time that it expresses what man would not do by his very nature, by the fallibilities of his nature, is to me an expression of God.
Oh, wow. This is, so basically you're saying when you read the Bible, the things that sound like they're man from men in origin to you are from men. And the things that don't sound like something a man would come up with are from God.
Correct. Because of course, because the Bible is, of course, it is written by man as well. There are, Moses has his hand.
Hang on. So,
sorry.
Can you give an example of a specific thing, since you say there's many, where this must come from God? Like what?
Yes. Well, I wouldn't say it must, but it almost definitely would come from a God. I mean, I can't speak in absolutes, but it must come from, it can't come from anything natural. And for an example, I'll make my first example.
It's funny that you just, after asserting that you say you can't do anything, and you say almost definitely, then you asserted that it can't come from anything natural. Just give me the example. We'll get into whether or not it's non-natural in origin and how you know.
Right. Well, again, I'm not here to prove the existence of God. I don't think proof of God can be made. I don't think we can make that. Otherwise,
what's the point? What's the point then? If all you're calling in is to say that you're convinced that you read some things that are from God, but you have no way of demonstrating it, then why should we care?
Well, I have a way of demonstrating that it's far more likely to come from a higher authority or a supernatural outside of nature authority than from mankind alone.
I'll bet you $5,000 that you don't.
Well, it comes down to opinion, of course.
How do you
So,
demonstrate? So if we have no demonstration that the supernatural does exist or can exist, how could you ever conclude that something more probably comes from a supernatural source than a natural source?
Well, because by the nature of the words chosen and the nature of what it is being expressed.
We're back to, Ron, now you're back to, you can tell by the way it is. I'm saying to date, there's been no way that for anyone to tell if something is supernatural in origin. The supernatural has not been confirmed. And as long as that's the case, when you say it's more probable that it's supernatural than natural, what percentage of the natural world do you know and understand in order to be able to rule it out and declare that it's more probably supernatural?
Well, I don't know all of the natural world. That's true. I don't know all of there is to know in the natural world, so I can't say that. But what I do know of the natural world is that some things come from the natural world, can't and typically don't come from the natural world. Mankind is the state of nature. The state of nature is universal.
Not only does that not make sense, but we're still waiting. Give me an example of one thing that is said in the Hebrew Bible that you assert cannot come from a natural source.
Okay. Well, many things. But
I just want one. I don't care about any bravado or grandstanding. I want one.
Great.
The one fucking one that I've been asking for 5 fucking minutes.
Genesis 1:1.
Bullshit.
What do you mean bullshit?
Goodbye, Ron. Goodbye, Ron.
Oh, is that it? That's weak.
Yeah,
that's weak.
It.
I can explain myself. I can explain myself, but if you want to hang up, then that's the easy way out. That's not a response. That's an answer.
You want to know what's weak? The phrase in Genesis 1:1 is, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. This is a statement by someone that they are convinced that there is a being that created everything, which, by the way, exists in many different religions. There's what evidence can you provide that it is impossible or incredibly unlikely for any natural source to produce that specific sentence?
Okay, well, if you let me explain myself before you hang up on me, then...
Here you go. I'm going to mute you, and you're going to sit there and you're going to listen to me for a minute. Stop whining about us trying to direct the call to a better understanding of what you're claiming. But you're the one that called in to assert that something is more probably supernatural than natural. And when asked for an example, you pointed to Genesis 1:1. It is ridiculous at its face to suggest that this claim that there's a God that made everything couldn't come from a natural source, since literally all of the ones from the other religions that you would reject definitely come from a natural source, unless you think that everybody was deceived by Satan in all of those other religions to ever have the thought. But it's absolutely preposterous and shows that you know nothing at all about human nature to think that humans can't look and say, wow, this person is faster or smarter or quicker than this one, and therefore there might be something that is faster and smarter and quicker than us. I can make something, you can make something better. Hey, maybe where did everything come from? Ooh, I don't know. Maybe somebody made it. Well, no human could make it. Well, it's somebody that's more powerful than that. This natural progression is how we get to Superman. It's how we get to the Beyonder. It's how we get to everything in Marvel. It is preposterous for you to suggest that. But if all you're going to do is suggest that I'm going to hang up on you for being silly and whine about it instead of actually presenting the case, then we're going to get nowhere. So I'm going to take you off mute and we're going to try this again. I'm going to take you off mute. And the question you need to answer is, what evidence can you present, objectively verifiable evidence, that Genesis 1:1 could not be the product of a natural mind?
Right. Well, Again, it's not could not, because that would be 100%. That would be an absolute, and we can't go there. That's proof. I'll say most likely that it does not come. Why? I'll tell you why. Because Genesis 1:1, it starts with the creation of the universe. It's a very non-chauvinistic way to begin a book about a people if the book is supposed to be about a people, which is the way every other book to date has been produced. So because there is a universal message, a very non-human-centric and a very non-ethnocentric way of beginning the book, for the whole book of the first of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, it's entirely universal and in no way has anything to do.
I didn't mute you or hang up on you.
Oh, do we lose you?
You
Ron?
silenced yourself.
I'm back. I'm here. I'm here. What point did you stop hearing me?
After your completely unfounded assertion that also isn't accurate, because it starts with "in the beginning God," and you're saying that that could not, or almost certainly didn't come from a human mind, because other books you can point to start with a focus on the humans. I'm sorry, but your argument is fallacious and question begging. What is your evidence that this is unlikely to have come from a human mind?
Well, I don't know what you mean by evidence. I mean, evidence doesn't have to be absolute. I mean, evidence can be suggesting. I'm making an inductive argument. I'm drawing a number of specifics from the Bible,
you're making a
from the Hebrew Bible.
Unfounded assertion, and you're just saying that because
why is it unfounded?
Yes, you are. If you'll shut up and listen, if you assert that X is unlikely to be a certain way because other examples of things similar to X are not that way, that is a fallacious line of reasoning. It is not.
Why?
It is not an argument supported. It is not an argument supported by evidence. It's like saying there are no black swans because every swan I've seen is white. It's literally the black swan fallacy.
Okay.
Also, Ron.
Okay. Interesting point, Matt. But of course, what fails about black swan, it's still a natural explanation of the black swan.
Okay, I'm going to mute you because Paul's trying to ask you a question. And while I think it's nice that you acknowledge that I had an interesting point, you then immediately tried to diverge away from that interesting point by saying that thing is still natural, which is completely irrelevant to the point that you're trying to make. A fallacy is a fallacy not because of its content, not because it's natural. I wasn't saying that this is a natural thing. Paul, please, you had a question.
Well, yeah, so Matt explained why your whole category of argument can't work. I would like to just ask a question why your specific example is terrible, even if that were a great way to argue. Have you heard of the Enuma Elish?
Pardon?
Have you heard of the Enuma Elish?
No, I haven't.
So the Enuma Elish is the Mesopotamian creation myth. And the Mesopotamian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, is almost unanimously by scholars admitted to be the thing that Genesis 1 is based upon. Now, they don't think, Christian scholars and Jewish scholars don't think that they copy the Enuma Elish in order to, as that was a polytheist thing, and they wanted to make it their own monotheist. But they definitely copied it in structure and in words and in verbiage. They absolutely, Genesis 1 was inspired by the literature of the Enuma Elish, such that it needs to be explained by Hebrew scholars. So, the first words of the Enuma Elish are, "It begins." And that's actually what Enuma Elish means. It begins. So, the very verse you picked is almost unanimously by Christian and Hebrew scholars to be a literature copy of another work that predated it and was definitely man-made. So I don't know how you can point to this example as something that couldn't be a sentence that would be constructed by humans, when every scholar that studies this, including people who believe what you believe, say that this was a literary copy.
Can I respond?
Yeah, please.
Well, a literary copy, the fact that it may have been a copy or a mimicking of what came before it, in no way negates its truth. In no way. In fact,
No, but I didn't argue that it changed the truth. You said that no human could come up with this sentence. No human could come up with this concept.
Right.
And I've just pointed out that
I'm not
humans
sure. I'm not sure. I
before-
know if you can tell me more about that Mesopotamian myth. Is that the myth of Utnapishtim?
No,
It's the Babylonian creation myth. But here's another thing that you did when you tried to suggest. Another thing that you did when you tried to suggest that this was unique is you portrayed it as if it is a storybook about us. And in all of these other storybooks that you want to point to about us, they begin with something about us and our ego, and no man could do that. And yet you're categorizing it in a way that's not accurate, because the Bible is a collection of different books. And the purpose of the first chapter of the first book is to present the creation story, not, and even if it was only there to present the creation story of man, it begins with, and there's only a handful of verses, it's a single page, you get to man by the end of it, and then all the rest of it becomes about that. But standard storytelling for creation myths is to talk about the creation and origin of everything, which is why the various creation myths have explanations of it's turtles all the way down, or some god did this, or you're the snot flung off of somebody's fingers, or anything else. All of these things are about the creation of everything. And a good chunk of them begin with creation from chaos. The Babylonian myth, Greek myths, Korean creation myths, all Sumerian, all of these things are here. And you're saying that, well, I can't be certain, but it's almost certainly impossible for any human to come up with the sentence, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, when literally Paul just gave you an example that some people think the Bible was copied from, but in any extent, there are a number of creation myths that begin with before it began, or before this began, or when this began, and it's talking about the universe. The very notion that human beings have not been sitting around thinking about and talking about and creating explanations for the origin of everything and why there's something rather than nothing is preposterous, which is why I scoffed the instant you mentioned Genesis 1:1.
Okay, well, I don't know. I don't know how to make an argument against your scoffing.
I know you don't know how to make an argument.
My point still stands, because if you look at the Babylonian myth, if I can explain myself for a second, the Babylonian myth that you mentioned.
This is not the reiteration show. You don't just get to start over to say the same shit again.
Well, I'm responding.
Either you come.
I'm not. I'm responding to the Babylonian myth.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. No, now are you going to be talking at all? You're not just going to sit here and reiterate the stuff that we've already objected to. Do you have some new evidence to support your case that only a natural mind is incredibly unlikely to have come up with that thing? And how unlikely is it?
Well, if I can respond the way I would like to respond.
Okay. Listen, jackass, you and I have done this tap dance several times here. Every time I finish, you go with, well, if I'm allowed to respond the way, no, that you're going to end up just whining like that until I hang up on you. And then you'll think that you won something when you didn't. So here's the way arguments work. You present your case for something, and then the other side presents some sort of rebuttal. And when you're asked for additional evidence, you don't just say, well, my point still stands and I'm going to reiterate it, because nobody needs to hear you say that shit again on something that's recorded where they can go rewind. Do you have some other case to make for why Genesis 1:1 is more likely to be of supernatural origin than natural origin? And if you do, I'd like to know how you calculated or approximated that probability that supernatural is a more likely explanation for the source of Genesis 1:1 than natural. That's interesting. You're up.
Well, because the whole book continues that way. The whole book continues with the universal message. If you read 2 more sentences into the Babylonian myth that your friend mentioned, which is a great point, you could see that it failed very quickly in its state of nature, where the gods start fighting amongst themselves, and they start having kids.
How do you know that's not true?
How
do you know that's not true?
Because they have offspring. Because gods don't have offspring. How do you know
that's not true? How do you know that's not true? I
don't know it's not true, but it's a very natural thing for a human.
Then why are you objecting?
It seems like something that a human would want to create when it talks about the mighty gods vanquishing the weaker gods.
Okay, and it seems like something a human might want to create, that there's a God who knows and loves them and destroys the other gods, just as Yahweh does to the gods of Egypt.
That's a separate point. Maybe that's true too, but I'm talking about the universal creation of the universe, the creation of the universe. There's no more than one God. There's one God.
How do you know that?
God is above nature.
How do you know that?
Based on the text that we're given. According to the Babylonian myth, there are multiple gods.
No, yes, I know that one of the religions that you're talking about is polytheistic, and then there's the Hebrew notion, which is actually henotheistic, that there are in fact other gods, but just Yahweh is the supreme God. But now you're asserting that there's only one God.
Judaism is not henotheistic.
I'm still fucking talking.
Judaism is not
what part of I'm still fucking talking is too difficult for you? Now you're asserting that there's only one God, and I've asked you, and I'm going to ask you again. How do you know there's only one God?
Because I'm using the Bible as the original text. This is the original.
That's a fallacy. That's a fallacy as well. All right, I'm going to mute you since you don't seem to be able to have a conversation at all. It is fallacious for you to say, I'm using the Bible. That's the thing you're trying to prove. Your argument, you're making a case that the Bible is divine. You don't get when you say, because it only points to one God. And when I say, how do you know that there's only one God? And you say, because I'm using the Bible. That's called circular reasoning. Do you have a non-fallacious argument, a non-obviously stupidly fallacious argument that is supported by evidence for your conclusion? Yes or no?
If we're going to talk about God, it has to be by the definition
yes or no question.
Of the first.
Okay, I'm going to mute you again. I've asked you a question. I'm going to ask you again because you seem to be incapable of actually paying attention and answering the question that was asked. Do you have a not stupidly fallacious argument supported by evidence that there is only one God? Yes or no?
The only evidence I have is
yes
the
or no.
first book that describes God. The first book that describes God.
Okay, Ron, I'm muting you again. First of all, when I say yes or no, that means the only word that should come out of your fucking mouth first is yes or no. That's how we're going to get the conversation back on track. I'd love to have an open, free-form conversation with you like I could with most other callers, but you seem to have some sort of dirty sock scrubbing around inside of your head that makes it impossible to do that, which is why I've had to put you on mute multiple times in order to get the conversation anywhere near where you're not just fallaciously asserting something. So when I say yes or no, I mean yes or no. But you don't get to then assert that the Bible is the first book about God. And even if it were, that wouldn't prove that it's right about God. I specifically asked if you had a not stupidly fallacious argument supported by evidence, and you immediately ignored the yes or no, and then presented another fallacious argument without supporting evidence. So do you, yes or no, have a not fallacious argument for why there must be one God and only one God?
That wasn't my original argument. My point was the divinity of the Torah.
Goodbye.
The divinity of God. So
goodbye, you dishonest fuck.
Exactly. Weak,
you won't answer
very
yes
weak,
or no.
Very weak.
You know what's
This is the hang-up show. This is the hang-up line?
Yes,
the hang-up?
No, sir. It's not the hang-up line. It's supposed to be where you call in and present arguments for your belief supported by evidence, but you are incapable of actually assessing things fairly and in having a conversation about these things. You keep making fallacious arguments. That's your fault. You're the weak one here. I'm the one identifying fallacies. You're the one spewing them out. You don't get to suggest that I'm the weak one when you're doing that.
Why am I falsely asserting? Why is it false? I'm making a premise. I'm making a syllogism. Why am I falsely asserting?
I don't believe that you know what a syllogism is. But when you make, so if you, Ron, if you were to say the Torah holds that there is one God, well, that's still dubious, because there's many people who would view the Torah's view on gods as if it was henotheistic and not monotheistic, which is one of the reasons that Muslims argue that theirs was the first monotheistic religion. I'm not necessarily convinced that theirs is more accurate than that. But when you present a fallacious argument and we point out the fallacy, that doesn't mean you get to keep going. A fallacy means your argument is rendered useless. It means that we cannot establish whether or not your conclusion is true or not. So, do you have a non-fallacious argument to present for your case? Yes or no?
Yes.
What is the non-fallacious argument for your case?
Well, I have 120 more examples where the Bible reveals it's non-divinity.
Ron, you said you knew what a syllogism was.
You're calling it...
Ron, okay, I'm fucking muting you now. You're never, ever, ever, ever going to be able to talk over me on my fucking show. Ever. I'm going to unmute you. And when I do, you are going to present a syllogism, because you claim to know what one is, that is not fallacious, that demonstrates your case. Otherwise, we're going to all point at you, call you weak sauce, and let you go. I'm unmuting you now. Please present your syllogism for your case.
Well, I'm making an inductive argument. And my inductive argument is strong.
You're weak sauce. You're weak sauce, weak sauce, weak sauce, weak sauce. You are a pathetic example of a defender of any faith. You don't know what a syllogism is. You cannot have a conversation. You've presented nothing but assertions and fallacies. You are weak sauce. Goodbye. You are the weakest link.
This is entirely unlike me, but that was very weak sauce. Wow. Not good. He agreed that his book was a polemic. It's a polemic against another text, but my text had to be entirely unique. No. I mean, you gave the fallacy why the whole category doesn't work. So it was silly to continue, but yeah.
I it's like, how many chances are we going to give Ron when he presents something? We point out why it can't be that way. How do you, first of all, I have no way of knowing whether anything is supernatural or not. I have no way of knowing that. Nobody's ever demonstrated any way that we can determine if something's supernatural. And so when someone tells me that they've determined that something is more probable from a supernatural source than a natural source, I already know they don't understand the subject at all. Because probability is either a mathematical calculation, or you can be speaking colloquially and just talking about an approximation that based on, these data points and everything else. And so Ron tried to do that by saying, hey, of these other stories about us, none of them begin with a God creating the universe. And then you point out, yeah, actually they do. I mean, this is not every religious book begins with a creation myth, but creation myths tend to include all of creation and not just, one little spot or one person. And by the way, given the Hebrew scripture, the creation story is a page and a half and still includes a lot about us, because the point is to say, in the beginning, God created everything. Here's what happened. And then we created humans, and they sinned and brought sin and death into the world. And here's the story of what happened after that. It is basic storytelling.
To his weird point, he was saying, well, Genesis starts with all these things. Why would it include that he made light? Well, because the other societies in Mesopotamia worshipped light. So the author of Genesis wanted to say, oh yeah, you worship light? My God made light. Oh, you worship the stars? My God made the stars. Like it is, that's why it was told that way. And
your sun God is weak. Your sun God is weak, Sauce, because my God created the sun and all of the pinholes in the curtain of night.
Exactly. Yes, the burning of the bosom wasn't there for me, Matt.
Well, we have another theist who actually has a question for us, and so this one will go a little bit differently. But Cole's in Chesapeake Bay, pronouns are he, them, and wants to talk about aliens, gods, demons, and angels. So, what are you looking for, Cole? Welcome. You're on with Paul and Matt.
Hey, how y'all doing? What was that last fellow's name on here?
Why does it matter?
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, yeah. That dude was a cook. He likes to watch his wife get fucked on.
All right. So, Arden will get a timestamp, and that'll be going. So here we go. We're going to move on to another caller, and we have Damien in New York. Pronouns are he, him. Damien, how you doing, and how can we help?
Hey, how's it going, guys? First time caller. I'm a long time listener. Find you guys very inspiring, and I love what you do. And I just wanted to talk about something that I think you, Matt, have mentioned a long time ago. That you like certain things about, or that come with religion, that come bundled with religion, like music and art and architecture. And I just want to talk, as a secular humanist, how we can appreciate those things.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, we're here. The floor is yours.
Hello?
Can you not hear us?
We hear you.
Hello?
Evidently not.
Hi, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Can you hear
I don't
us?
think you hear.
Oh, now I hear you. Yeah, I can hear you for a bit. Yeah, so, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I just want to discuss something that I think Matt has said in the past, that basically
You don't
there are
have to
certain things
reiterate.
that come bundled
Go
with
ahead.
religion. Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You want to talk
Can
about...
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, just that there are certain things that come bundled with religion, like art and music.
Oh my God, this is like a fucking comedy. We're aware of what you want to talk about. Talk about it.
Well, I just wanted to discuss what you guys think about that, or if you still hold that belief that there are certain things that come bundled with religion that have value and how we can best appreciate them.
There are things that religions have adopted that have value, and we can value them. I don't know what else there is to say.
Well, I think I remember you, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, specifically saying years ago that you don't think, for example, certain works of music, I think maybe you said Bach or something, would have existed without religion, and you struggle with that, and that's kind of what inspired me to call in.
I've never said anything at all like that.
Okay, then I stand corrected, and I'm sorry.
What I've said is that there are things, like I like some architecture that is tied to churches, but isn't necessarily tied to religion. There's music that is religious that I would like to enjoy, but I can't because of the message. But I don't know that I've ever talked about Bach. I say I've never said that. I guess I can't technically say I've never said it, because it's possible that under some circumstance somewhere, but it's like you're sitting here saying, hey, I'd like to talk about how we can appreciate those things. And my answer is, okay, we appreciate them. I don't.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but you kind of answered my question. You said that there are certain things that you want to like, but you can't because of the message. And that, I guess that kind of like puts a pin in it and clarifies your position. And I appreciate that. I'm sorry for the beginning of the call. There's just the delay was really throwing me off.
Okay.
So yeah, if that's it, I don't want to waste your time. Thanks for taking the call.
Okay. Thanks. I really thought there was potentially, more there.
It's weird that you would say that the world, I understand a certain piece of art, like the Sistine Chapel as it is, wouldn't have existed without religion. What the weird assertion that I can never buy into is like, well, if there hadn't been religion, Michelangelo wouldn't have created some painting that we all enjoy.
Yeah.
Like those are not tied together. I see J. Warner Wallace and other people like try and make these arguments that if religion hadn't existed, X wouldn't have happened. And it's kind of like, well, unfortunately, we can't redo history to test that hypothesis. So it's a weird assertion to make.
And that's the one thing is that, yeah, we don't have a time machine. We can't redo history. And people talk about, oh, do you got free will? If you restarted the universe, would this happen? If we did this differently without religion, we have this. Would we have the Ave Maria? No, but we might have that same tune with potentially different lyrics, because we don't understand what how the complex nature of the world gets a creative mind to produce a particular work. It's like I'm Arden's now watching Doctor Who with me, and so we're enjoying that. It's if it hadn't been for Tom Baker, would we be watching Doctor Who today? Well, it's impossible to say because Tom was immensely popular. He was everybody's favorite doctor. I'm exaggerating slightly, for a good period of time. And yet still, after that, you had Peter Davison, Colin Baker, and then Sylvester McCoy, and then Paul McGann, and then nothing, because the popularity drove off. And so when we reboot it, is it more fair to say, ooh, it's Christopher Eccleston, but he only did, one season. Is it any of the actors, or is there something about the character or the writing? If William Hartnell hadn't done it in the first place, would we have any of it now? If they hadn't come up with an idea of regeneration, would the show have died out, or would it still be around, 50 years later, 60 years later? It is, you can't say with confidence, this is what would have been. But I can say that while the things that I appreciate about some religious architecture or structures isn't tied to any tenet of the religion. The Gothic style of architecture where you get, in spires and all this stuff, there may be things that might be tied to religion in our minds, but the structural aspect is just about the beauty in design. It is about, can you build a structure and can you make it look good and look interesting? And the things that we find interesting about it, that's about us. It's not about the religion. It is religions co-opting the things that we find pretty. You know why churches aren't ugly? Because if religions built ugly fucking churches, nobody'd be talking about, ooh, look at did you see the cool church down there? Why would I want to go in there? Oh, and granted, there are ugly churches. There's a cowboy church down the road that's
mall churches, yeah.
But we're talking about, hey, we like stuff, and of course, religions are going to exploit the things we like. And you know what? We like music. We like, some of us. We like music. We like community. All of these things. It's completely unsurprising to me that religions leverage those things, because religions are leveraging us for our work and what we think and care about. We have one final caller for today, and that is calling from Arizona. Is it Yagi? Pronouns are they, them. Is that correct, Yagi? Oh, no.
Yes, indeed. Sorry.
All right. Welcome, Yagi. That's fine.
Welcome.
I was like, everybody's muted. And it may be a good thing to start off muted. Anyway, Yagi's here with a philosophical disproof of all gods in general. So welcome. Let's have it.
So basically, it's a 4-point reasoning. So the first point is that a god is a being worth worshiping. The second is that a being that wants to be worshipped is effectively narcissistic. It's not worth worshiping because it is, narcissistic, I guess. I'll leave it at that. the third point is that if it doesn't want to be worshipped out of less respect than it would require to worship it, you just shouldn't. And then if it's indifferent, then, it offers no reason whatsoever.
Okay. To be fair, I'm going to poo-poo this in exactly the same way if I didn't agree with it. So one of the things that I've said many times is that any being worth worshiping could never demand it or expect it or require it. That characteristic alone makes it unworthy of worship. And some being that would punish and kill you for not worshiping and revering it, that kind of goes counter to that. But I will say that your argument is not an argument. It's not structured in an argument. It's in a loose sense. It is not an argument against all gods, and it is not an argument against their existence so much as it's attempt at a reductio ad absurdum to show that a God that desires worship is unworthy of it, and that therefore there's a conflict there, which may be true, but it doesn't disprove all gods or any gods. It just shows that if there's a God that wants to be worshipped, it's not deserving of it.
Okay. Well, then you all have a great day.
All right.
What would you say it was? I'm sorry.
What would I say?
I think I dropped. You said it wasn't an argument. What would you say it was? How would I need to restructure it? Like so I can understand better.
Sure. Let me retract that. It's not a syllogism. It is 4 points that are loosely connected, but they're not exhausted.
Okay.
So when I say it's not an argument, I was basically saying it's not a syllogism, which may be unfair, that instead of you constructing a formal syllogism, you're just kind of, armchairing it. But with your first point is a God is a being worth worshiping. Well, you've already defined right there something that is inconsistent with some definitions of a God, because generally,
right,
even the God of classical theism, that is about a God that is sufficiently powerful and knowledgeable and benevolent. It doesn't have anything in the definition of a God of classical theism about it being worth worshiping. So you've started by narrowing things to a God that's worth worshiping.
I kind of overstepped the level of it to the screener. They asked, what kinds of gods, and I just kind of said all gods in general because I didn't think about it much.
But even in this case, when you say, "Hey, I'm going to present a God," or "I'm going to present an argument against gods that begins with a God is a being worth worshiping,"
right?
You got a lot of work, and I don't just mean this. I mean, how do you show that is a good definition of a God? That a God is a being worth worshiping. I don't know how you determine necessarily, or I don't know how you're using it to say X is worth worshiping. And meanwhile, are there things that aren't a God that are worth worshiping?
Right, like pragmatically, I might have all kinds of reasons to worship things that get me benefits. So that's a little bit loose as well.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, here's the set of all things that are worth worshiping, and a subset of that is the set of gods, because a God is a being that's worth worshiping. Okay. And what I guess I'm asking is, are there other things in that set? Are there other things that are worth worshiping? And is it necessarily the case that a God is a full subset of the set of things that are worth worshiping? Maybe it overlaps it. Maybe it's completely separate. Because I could imagine an evil God that is a creator and is powerful and, all those things. But I wouldn't think they were worth worshiping.
I wouldn't call that, necessarily, a God. If it's not, that's ultimately like what you're getting at. Worship is the heart of what what you really get at when you're talking about, religion. I would refer to that more as like a physical demon, and like not meaning like it's evil. Well, it is evil, but not because it's evil, right? So because it has powers that are supernatural, I would classify it as a demon. And then, like
wow.
of groups of possible gods, all the ones with supernatural powers would also be classified as demons or daemons.
You have some incredibly esoteric definitions.
Mm-hmm.
Like your definition of God doesn't align with any normative usage of
all
God.
of them.
It's the fact that gods are worshipped is separate from whether or not they're worthy of worship. And generally, gods are viewed as a supreme being, an all-powerful being, a maximally powerful being, or the creator and origin and ruler of reality, or things like that, independent of whether or not they are worshipped or are worthy of worship. But now you've introduced a new term about supernatural abilities and daemons, and that being separate from a god. I don't know that you're arguing against anything that's useful.
I don't know that any God definitions are useful because they're unfalsifiable, but I get what you're saying. Well, you have, I think I'll have to review it and like in the video. But you have a great day. Yeah.
Okay. I just also want to throw in there, like if you threw out the sentence, if I lived in North Korea, Kim Jong-un is worth worshiping. An argument can be made that is a true thing. And so I see the same kind of weaknesses in your whole way. Like you're it's very loose on what the word worth and how you're using it, and worthiness versus is it worth my pragmatic time or effort to do so. So these are all just things you're going to have to shore up.
Right. So I guess I was looking at it from a moralistic view in terms of worthiness.
Well, when you re-represent, so whenever you present that, you'll need to build that in.
Right. So I'll figure it out and maybe call back, or like just to accept that I'm outright wrong.
Or I mean, when you get past the first one, where a god is a being worth worshiping, your second one is just states that a being that wants worship is narcissistic. Well, first of all, narcissism's a personality. I'm reading just so I get it right.
Right.
Narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. I'm pretty sure if you're God, you can't have an unreasonably high sense of your own importance under that. But even if it was a God, and even if it was narcissistic, what about it being narcissistic means it's actually unworthy of worship, or that there's any problem at all? You've got to show why there's a problem with something actually being narcissistic. I know that colloquially we run around saying, oh, narcissism is a bad thing, but that's not necessarily the case in every scenario. And I don't know. There's a bunch of work
I used narcissistic in a more colloquial way, and that wasn't exactly proper. That's fine. That does bad for mental health communities.
Yep. Anyway, dig in on it some more and see what you come up with.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Thanks, Yagi.
Huh?
I said thanks, Yagi.
Going? Oh, nope. Yeah. Have a great day.
Yeah.
You too. All right. Well, Paul.
Oh, that was interesting.
We have finished. Like
we're done.
We made it through the calls. It says there's still one caller, but it doesn't actually show up on the list. So we've made it through the callers for today. And there's some people that I want to thank. First of all, the callers. While it's great that there are people here watching and agreeing and joining me and pointing and saying, your weak sauce, Ron, your weak sauce. I'm still grateful that Ron called in, because it gets us an opportunity to talk about how you go about making an argument, how you go about presenting evidence. And if you're not able to say, hey, here's a reason to believe this without fallacies, I'm not, somebody's gonna be like, you're saying he's wrong because he's fallacious. No, that would be the fallacy. I actually know what I'm talking about when it comes to fallacies. Not going to say super expert or anything else, but the problem with a fallacious argument is that the conclusion cannot be reasonably accepted or determined to be false. It leaves you in a state of, I don't know. If your argument is poorly structured, we're stuck. If your argument is circular, oh, there's one God because I'm only referring to the Bible. Okay. There's one Voldemort and I'm only referring to the Harry Potter series. Those other books, they're fan fiction. I'm not going to go near that. There's only one James Bond. It doesn't matter what the movies did by putting different actors in there. There's one James Bond. It's not a title. It's not a position that gets passed around. It's a character. The fact that you did different movies starring different actors is no different than that there were different Peter Pans and, things like that. You can do stuff like that, but you are begging the question as soon as you say there must be one God because that's all the Torah talks about. Well, who gives a shit what the Torah talks about? That's what you're supposed to be demonstrating. Is you're supposed to be calling in to tell Paul and I why we should pay attention to and trust as reliable and authoritative the Bible, whether it's the Hebrew Bible or you want to dismiss the New Testament or whatever else. Ron's done that in the past. I've recognized the conversations with Ron. They don't seem to ever go very well. And I'm going to say that that's at least 18.2% my fault. But considering the conversation with Ron don't go very well, no matter who's here, I'm gonna stick with that number. And if I can make up a number like 18.2% as an approximation, then why won't I allow Ron to say that it's more probable that it's supernatural? That's easy. That's because I'm still making shit up that is consistent with the facts and evidence, and Ron's making shit up that is not. On that note, though, we appreciate our callers and our call screener today, Flabbergasted, as well as all of our moderators, Cookies and Stephanie and Morgan, and Skeptics and Scoundrels, and our producer, the lovely and talented Miss Ardenhart, who I need to ask, is there any announcement that I have not made that I need to make before we close today out?
Not that I know of.
In that case, Paul, I miss you. I'm glad we got to do a show today. I wish we could hang out. I can't wait. I know we're still unclear on what's actually going to be happening and when with regard to LionCon, but I look forward to when all of the people who are in chat can finally get, or most of them that are in chat, can finally get together with us to interact, have fun, have a drink if you're so inclined, have a chat if you want to, stand around and hover and listen to conversations, get a hug from somebody. Feel like you're not the only non-believer, the only non-resistant non-believer in your area by engaging with some other people who are going to tell you that they're non-resistant non-believers, and you're just going to have to take their word for it. In the meantime, don't forget to tune into Skeptalk tomorrow with Shannon Q and the Magic Skeptic. Magic Skeptic. That almost sounded like Magic Septic.
Ooh.
I haven't even met the guy.
That's a different show.
In any case, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. I look like that gopher at the end of Canada.
From Caddyshack.
I'm all right.
Here's a TikTok for the editors.